Welcome back to beautiful Reykjavík and beautiful Iceland, where we are starting today our last day here at the Reykjavík Global Forum. It's already day 3 of 3. Well, time flies when you're having fun, right? That's how the saying goes. And it's even more true when you're generating impact. So we're so super thrilled to see you and to see the outcomes of the forum happening. I am Silvana Koch-Merin, the founder and president of Women Political Leaders, and I'm pleased to be hosting you here with Hanna.
Thank you so much, Silvana. I am Hanna Birna Kristjánsdóttir, chair of the executive board of the Reykjavík Global Forum, and I work as senior advisor on women's leadership with UN Women in New York. We are so pleased that over 800 conversationists from 120 countries join the Reykjavík Global Forum via our virtual interactive platform for discussions, inputs, and in addition, everyone can of course listen in from CBS News, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. We encourage all of you to do so and to contribute to the conversation via social media using our hashtags Reykjavík20, Power Together, and Women Leaders.
And while indeed the conversation starts here in Reykjavík, we are sure these conversations inspire you to take action. And you can do this, for example, by making a very clear commitment. You can submit a Reykjavík pledge on our platform. And that's a pledge for what you are going to do between November 2020 and November 2021, the next Reykjavík Global Forum.
Because of course, the Reykjavík Global Forum is not only about all of our amazing conversationists and women leaders. It is mostly about all the initiatives and the outcome that we represent here in Reykjavík. So the Reykjavík Manual is being created at our action stages on our virtual platform. The Reykjavík satellites are taking place in 20 cities around the world. The Reykjavík Index is available online for you to view, and the Women World Atlas will be revealed today.
Indeed, we look very much forward to that and hope you're joining. So for today, we are proud to start the conversations with some really outstanding women leaders like Julia Gillard, Melinda Gates, Maria Ressa, Amy Weaver, Christy Tanner, Kersti Kaljulaid, the Icelandic Minister of Foreign Affairs, just to name a few. And of course, again, we have great Icelandic guests joining us in the studio.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Silvana, because we will also be in the studio discussing and having discussion with great guests throughout the day. But let's just start our program and our day. We are in for a really excited, packed program of women leaders sending their message to the world. And over to our master of ceremony for today, Ragnheiður Elín Árnadóttir, former Minister of Industry and Commerce here in Iceland and senior fellow with the Atlantic Council Global Energy Sector. Over to you, Ragnheiður.
Thank you, Hanna and Silvana. And now to kick off our final day of the Reykjavík Global Forum. As we know, each woman's path to leadership is different. At the forum, women political leaders and the government and Parliament of Iceland have created a community of leaders where personal stories and experiences can be shared. From this, we have learned that personal power can come from the most unexpected of places. In this next Power Off segment, we will hear from Anino Emuva on how to transform the feelings of loneliness and isolation that many leaders feel at the top into a powerful and positive force for owning one's possession of power.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session. I'd like to talk to you about the power of loneliness. My name is Anino Emuva. I'm an international management consultant. It is said that for leaders, it is lonely at the top, and even more so for female leaders. Globally, only 5% of top corporate CEOs are women, whilst only 2% of head of state are female. Yet diversity in leadership is shown to improve performance for organizations, for society and economies. As part of my work as an international management consultant, I'm also an executive strategist for women in leadership. Very often, women are the first in that position, and there is no blueprint of how to do it well, how to do it their way. So female leaders have to learn themselves and deal with being the first, the only, and this feeling of onlyness. How do you deal with onlyness? I'll give you an example. 4 years ago, I was fortunate enough to receive an invitation to attend the World Economic Forum. I arrived there, I looked around, and there were very few women, and even fewer like me. That feeling of onlyness washed all over me. Where is my place, I thought. I knew I had something to contribute. But there were women there, they were lost in the numbers. The second time around, I decided to turn it around. If I'm feeling only, I thought, surely these women must be as well. I decided to create a network for women going to Davos. We started out with 25, and by this year actually, we ended up with 100 across the world from all fields, from business, from academia, civil society, the arts, media. There were meetups in Zurich before the event. We shared tips for networking, for accommodation, events to attend, what to wear even. For many women, it was their first time, and probably it would be their only time to attend the World Economic Forum. We had our tribe and this feeling of community, and this onlyness and loneliness transformed into a feeling of community. We launched even the first inclusive international women's business leadership in Davos this year. It's now 11 months since then, and the collaboration and community still continue, albeit digitally. Business opportunities, boards, advisory positions, speaking engagements, leveraging each other's contacts, exchanging ideas, solving problems. And yes, even friendships were created. It is lonely as a woman in leadership, because very often you're the only one and you're the first in that position. But seek out the 5%, join a community of peers, create one if need be. Not only does this reduce loneliness, you can get help with problem solving, develop business collaborations and strategic alliances, share information, find opportunities. Importantly, get support and lots of laughter as well. As a leader, you are successful. With a community of peers, you create real impact. And by the way, I heard later that some men wanted to join our group because we had the best tips. Ladies, you have the power to transform loneliness into community.
Over the last 2 days, the Forum program has covered key global health issues, including mental health, caregiving, and immunizations. We will now turn to an issue that needs greater attention, particularly among women: chronic inflammatory diseases. Women living with such disease encounter multiple challenges, including greater stigmatization, unanswered questions, and limited information on how to best manage their illness. This discussion, featuring conversationalists Iris Lowe Friedrich, Caroline Wozniacki, Yoko Kamikawa, and Manuela Kasper-Claridge, will look at the burden of these diseases for women and how they can take control of their health and quality of care.
Good afternoon from Berlin, and a very warm welcome to all of you who join us for this session now. This panel considers the socio-economic burden of severe chronic diseases in women worldwide, and we will hear insights into the fight with a chronic disease from one of the great tennis champions. I'm joined by the Chief Medical Officer for UCB, a global biopharma company, Dr. Iris Lowe Friedrich, and by world-renowned Grand Slam tennis champion and rheumatoid arthritis patient Caroline Wozniacki. We will also hear comments by Japan's Minister of Justice, Yoko Kamikawa. But let's now go to Iris. Iris, you are the Chief Medical Officer at UCB. Why is this issue of inflammatory disease so important to you and to your company?
Hi, Manuela. UCB is a global biopharmaceutical company, and we are focused on creating value for people living with severe chronic diseases, including inflammatory diseases. We are working with stakeholders to address the unmet needs of patients and caregivers, and we want to help them achieve their goals and to live the lives they want. You might not know that chronic inflammatory diseases like Caroline's rheumatoid arthritis affect nearly 200 million people worldwide. And of course, it's not a surprise that approximately half of them are women. There are some serious inflammatory diseases, chronic inflammatory diseases, which are more prevalent in women than in men, even 3 times more prevalent in women than in men. So for UCB, this means that we need to work on the unique challenges that women living with these diseases encounter. These unique challenges are, for example, a greater feeling of stigmatization. Women are also more likely to suffer from stress and loneliness than men when living with a chronic disease. And again, these are not addressed in the current healthcare system. Another challenge for the women is that they are often diagnosed with their chronic disease during the height of their career and during their childbearing years. And of course, they wish to carry on working. They want to live the life they have chosen, and they want to build a family while managing their disease. And very often there are, of course, concerns and many unanswered questions. Unfortunately, there is still very limited and conflicting information on how to best manage the disease. And we are deeply committed to ensure that appropriate data are generated and that information is available for women and for the physicians they are working with.
So Iris, is there currently a disparity between genders in healthcare, and specifically in women with these severe chronic diseases like Caroline's?
Yeah, I think, if you look at the latest WHO report, I believe issued in 2019, that showed that women are outliving men everywhere in the world. And the gap in life expectancy would be even wider in women if women in low-income countries had better access to health care. And yet current treatment guidelines do not recognize gender as a reason to consider different approaches to their care. Policies and frameworks need to ensure that they reflect an equity-based approach to the care of women. Health systems that take account of gender differences in their public health strategies are more likely to be successful.
So how does UCB, your company, tackle these kind of gender disparities, and what do you do?
Yeah, at UCB, we are very pleased with the research and the support that we have already provided for many years in our efforts to improve the care for women of childbearing age living with severe chronic diseases. Of course, we know that there's still a need to improve the standard of care for these women. Within our current and future therapeutic areas, we are committed to become the leader amongst women of childbearing age by empowering informed decisions and optimized care management. And this is why, together with UCB, we partner with Caroline Wozniacki, a wonderful woman and amazing tennis champion. And we have launched a new global awareness and empowerment campaign, which specifically addresses women living with chronic inflammatory diseases. This program ultimately aims to empower women with inflammatory diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, axial spondyloarthritis, psoriatic arthritis, and psoriasis to make informed decisions about their care and to have productive discussions with their healthcare providers. The campaign aims to inspire, to encourage, and to empower women through sharing Caroline's personal journey. This is how we are supporting women, and this is a deep commitment near and dear to our heart and our mission.
Thank you, Iris. And now let's go over to Caroline, who's joining us from St. Louis in the US. And Caroline will share her personal story with us. Caroline, thank you for joining us, and please go ahead.
Thanks so much for having me. I had just won the Australian Open back in January 2018, but at the lead up to the US Open in the fall, I started feeling some unexplained symptoms like extreme exhaustion, sore joints, and other symptoms that, I just couldn't really understand and put together. One moment I was #1 in the world in tennis and at my physical peak, and that's what I was known for. And then quite suddenly I just began feeling really sick, and I awoke one day with severe pain and I couldn't get out of bed. I just looked at my husband and I was like, I can't get out of bed. I can't even move my arms. I can't do anything. So, that was a big shock to me. My husband had to carry me out of bed and make sure that we could get to the airport, and he packed all my bags and all that. So I obviously immediately sought medical attention. And I was told by the doctors that it was either me being in bad shape, that it was a mental issue for me, that maybe I was overworked or even pregnant, and that it was, just all in my head. And I was like, well, I know that there's something going on with me. I know that there's something wrong with my body, and I just need to know what it is. And it was really just an emotional and physical roller coaster for me. I didn't know how to make people really understand what I was going through and experiencing, because it's not something that you can really see from the outside. It's not like you have a broken arm or a broken leg where you can really tell. So I was just feeling really alone. And I was thinking, if so many doctors could get my diagnosis wrong, how about, even though I had access to the best doctors via the tennis, and they had to take me seriously, I thought, how about the normal, regular woman that comes in and tells the doctor how they're feeling? How are they going to get diagnosed, and how are they going to get on with the treatment plan? So my turning point really came when I finally found an incredible rheumatologist who understood what it was that I was going through. She got me on a game plan. She gave me the diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis, and that was really my first victory. I'd finally found a reason for all my unexplained symptoms, and I could really start focusing on my life and set new goals and focusing on how I could gain an advantage over RA. And this was a new me, and it really transformed me. Now I work every day to manage my rheumatoid arthritis. Some days are victories and others are not, and that's okay. I try not to get frustrated with my body when things don't go right or when I wake up feeling exhausted, but I also won't let it hold me back. I know that rheumatoid arthritis will keep being with me for the rest of my life, and so I've educated myself, and I have a long-term and evolving game plan with my rheumatologist. And through the support of my specialists and my family, my husband, my friends, and the whole patient community, I've never been more excited about my future, including new roles that are beyond tennis, and including, possibly starting a family in the future. And really the possibilities feel endless at this moment, and I just can't wait to see what's next for me. And really that's why also I am so proud to have worked in close collaboration with UCB to help shape the Advantage HERS program. I see my role as being a loud voice for women who aren't being listened to. I also see it as connecting and doing my bit to inspire women living with chronic inflammatory diseases to support each other and build their own game plan with their specialist so that they can get their lives and live their lives to the fullest and achieve their dreams. Anyone who wants to know even more about my journey can get involved and follow me on social media channels on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and follow #AdvantageHers. Also visit advantagehers.com for more information and resources.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and thank you for being so open with us and sharing your story. It's very important to hear this story from you and your personal experiences. Let me go to Iris now. How unique are Caroline's experiences, or is this something other women experience day to day as well?
I think the journey that Caroline outlines has some very typical features. Unfortunately, it can be very hard and very difficult to get to a proper diagnosis. I think one of the issues that we are confronted with is that there's still a lack of proper education of healthcare providers. And sometimes we also recognize that there is not appropriate collaboration between different medical disciplines, and really caring for the lifetime outcome of a patient requires a multidisciplinary approach. Another topic that I would really like to highlight is that good conversations that enable a good decision need to be based on data, and women are not always included in clinical research, are not always included in clinical studies. And so very often, with all good intentions, we are lacking high quality information that would enable appropriate treatment. So for example, when you look at pregnancy and women with chronic inflammatory diseases who want to become pregnant, there has been an ethic framework in the past that, of course, for very good reasons, was very much biased towards the unborn. But of course, we also need to be mindful that withdrawing treatment from the mother is probably not appropriate, and a well-treated mother will have a better, healthier life, and probably also a better pregnancy, which again is the right thing for the fetus. So there's a lot of more balanced data generation and more balanced conversations that are needed.
Thank you, Iris. And Caroline, you mentioned the #AdvantageHers. What do you want to achieve with having this hashtag? What is your look into the future?
Yes, we named the campaign #AdvantageHers, and it was a little bit on a tennis analogy. You know, I wanted always to be my advantage. You want it to be her advantage every time, and we know that sometimes that's not possible, and sometimes we'll wake up and not feel our best, but we'll do everything possible to make it #AdvantageHers. And so that's kind of the play on words that we had. And so now with using #AdvantageHers on the social media channels, we can all come together, share our stories, build a community where we can really inspire one another and feel like we are in this together. We're battling our autoimmune diseases together. And that's something that I found very important, because before I got diagnosed, and even at the beginning when I got diagnosed, even though I have the most supportive family, the most supportive husband, and they listened to me, it still was very difficult for them to understand exactly what it was that I was going through, because they'd never felt the way I was feeling. And even though I was speaking to them, they looked at me and I looked fine. So it can feel very lonely sometimes. And that's why I think it's so important that we have built this community where not only can you gain information, but we can be in a place where we can share our stories, feel like other people really understand what you're going through, and we can help one another gain the advantage over our autoimmune diseases.
Thank you very much, Caroline. #AdvantageHers. But now we have a video message by the Minister of Justice, Her Excellency Yoko Kamikawa from Japan.
Excellencies, distinguished speakers, and guests. Good morning. I am Kamikawa Yoko, Minister of Justice of Japan. This September, the Suga cabinet was newly formed, and I was appointed as a Minister of Justice for the third time. I regret that I cannot attend this forum since the Suga cabinet is facing an important first diet session. Last year, Japan hosted WPL Summit on the main theme of taking actions to advance society through the SDGs. After the productive discussion, an outcome declaration was adopted to support women's health over their lifetimes as one of the important pillars. It is very significant and timely to focus on women's health today under the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic causes not only the direct health damage, but also the secondary health damage. While the countries are thoroughly taking measures of infection prevention and control for COVID-19, the secondary health damage has left unsolved as a potential problem. The long stay at home in line with anxiety of employment and future life caused by COVID-19 worsens mental health and illness, such as depression and dementia, and increases the risk of suicide. I would like to emphasize to rethink the risk for women in pregnancy, childbirth, and childcare period, and elderly women. It has been pointed out by some experts that the diagnosis of depression is a risk factor for suicide during perinatal period. As the pandemic reduces the opportunity to communicate with others, women's mental health care has become an important issue. Considering the proportion of women aged 70 and over is greater than that of men in Japan, the secondary health damage is a problem for the elderly as well as for women. Since those new health damages are pressing challenges for countries, it is important to build a platform in collaboration with empirical researches and make policies for COVID-19 secondary health damage. Japan started to consider the prevention of secondary health damage by utilizing 3 approaches: developing ICT infrastructure, connecting local community activities, promoting exercise and sports. New approaches to women's health are needed based on the key concept of human security. I hope the WPL becomes a valuable platform to collect and analyze data, gather wisdom, and share the best practices among political women leaders in order to achieve the global health coverage which leaves no one behind. I am eager to continue taking action for promoting women's empowerment and bringing about an inclusive society. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much to Her Excellency Minister Yuko Kamikawa, and a big thank you also to Iris in Düsseldorf and to Caroline in St. Louis, and to all of you who joined this session, and all the best for me here in Berlin.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
It has been said that one should never waste a good crisis. While COVID-19 presents significant challenges to global health, economic growth, and well-being, it has also provided an opportunity to speed up much-needed change. This next panel, Fast forward to now, innovation driven by restriction. We'll look at the rapid transformation of digital communications, online consumption, and access to the news, and how we can fast-track progress in key areas in the midst of a crisis. Please welcome conversationalists Claire Akamanzi, Christy Tanner, Diane Wang, and Elise Hufano for this discussion.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Elise Hufano, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Christy Tanner and Diane Wang. Unfortunately, Claire Akamanzi wasn't able to join us today, but she's recorded a video message, which we'd like to see now.
Greetings from Kigali, Rwanda. My name is Claire Akamanzi, and I am the CEO of the Rwanda Development Board. I am also very much honored and privileged to be a member of the cabinet of Rwanda. Under his leadership, President Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda. So digital connectivity has been a priority for Rwanda for many years. It started with the government of Rwanda making a choice that ICT was going to be an engine that will drive Rwanda's quest to becoming a knowledge-based economy. And so we put in place, first of all, policies and strategies that made it very clear how Rwanda was going to adopt digital connectivity and the ICT sector as part of its economic development plans. We had policies and strategies such as the Vision 2020, Vision 2050 now, that aims at making Rwanda a middle income and a developed country eventually. We also developed what we call the Rwanda ICT Sector Plan, which was a very clear elaboration of what the priorities for Rwanda were going to be in the ICT connectivity area, from building infrastructure to skills development, as well as being able to adopt and bring investors in this sector. The other one was what we call the Smart Rwanda Master Plan, which elaborated the sectors that Rwanda was going to be focusing on, whether it's smart cities, whether it's e-health, e-education, e-trade, among many other sectors. And of course, we also adopted very upcoming and important subsectors such as fintech as part of what we were going to do. And all of these are efforts that the government of Rwanda put in its policies and strategies before COVID-19 pandemic happened. We also established fiscal incentives to support connectivity for our people. We removed import duties and VAT taxes on any imports of devices coming to Rwanda. So if you brought in a laptop or a computer or a mobile phone, you paid no taxes. And the idea was to make it affordable for people to purchase them. And this is why today the mobile phone penetration in our country stands at 76%. Again, very much a high number because of all these policies that the government put in place. We also attracted investors to come and support this plan that the government had. We attracted telecom companies and other ICT-related companies. And today, we've had about $600 million of investments over the last decade in just the ICT sector from the private sector. And we have telecom companies such as Airtel, such as Tigo, such as MTN that have benefited from the environment we've put in place in our country. But we also have 4G LTE connectivity that came through an investment with Korea Telecom in our country. And of course, most recently, we also have smartphones manufacturing being made in Rwanda. Today, you can use and own a made in Rwanda Maraphones company, mobile phone that is made right here in our country. Now, to support all of that, building infrastructure was extremely important. We built over 5,000 kilometers of fiber broadband infrastructure in our country, including 4G LTE network that we did, as I said, with Korea Telecom. And what was also very important for us is to bring all these investments and all this infrastructure closer to our people, because there's some people that still don't have access to devices. We built what we call service access points in all the districts of Rwanda. These are community centers that are equipped with computers, equipped with internet, that people can go as communities and have access to whatever they want to do online. Now, that includes bringing services very close to our people. We have a citizen platform where all key services are applied for online. It's called Irembo platform. When you go to Irembo, you can apply for a birth certificate, you can apply for land, company registration, passport, travel documents, all in one platform called Irembo. Now, when citizens go to these communal service centers, they can actually access these products and these services online in a very easy and affordable way that government has supported for those who don't have access to devices. On that note, I really want to thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to participate from Kigali, again, another way of working remotely. And I want to wish all the women leaders and all the other participants at the Reykjavík Global Forum a very successful forum. Thank you.
Wonderful. So Claire has shared with us some of the insights from their fast-track digital journey. Christy, I'd like to turn to you. During the pandemic, media consumption has skyrocketed. People are desperate and hungry for information. You oversee news on all CBS digital platforms. What trends have you noticed? What opportunities do you think this points to going forward? And how do we use this moment in time to expand access to trusted information?
Well, I run our free global 24/7 streaming news service, which is called CBSN. We are available on more than 20 devices, services, and platforms, everything from your mobile phone to a desktop browser to Roku, Amazon Fire-enabled TVs, Apple TV, and we're available in more than 90 countries. So the trends that we're seeing are that interest in trusted news brands, such as CBS News, is surging. So people want facts and knowledge. Those who are turning to us for news are not looking for opinion. They're really looking for straight news, nonpartisan. I don't want to say unbiased because that word's been really overused, but nonpartisan, I think, is the key to our brand being trusted. What we're seeing, and this is fascinating, is that if I was to turn my laptop around right now, which I won't do, I am watching in my bedroom us speaking on the stream on CBSN. So it's a very meta moment for me. But this is able to be seen by anybody in the world on a phone, a laptop, or a connected device. And we are seeing, in terms of trends, typically English-speaking countries are where we see surges. Australia, Canada, UK, Mexico as a border state. But what we saw last week during the election were huge spikes in Asia. So Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, huge spikes for our election coverage. Germany was another big spike last week. So we are seeing local stories become global news. And I think the US election is really the best example of that. Our coverage of people counting ballots in Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, these are, for us, very local stories coming down to a few votes in a certain county. But the world was watching the US election, trying to understand what this ballot counting meant and how it ultimately would impact them. So I think, Zoom has made us all adapt to a new working environment. And it's made our job easier. It's enabled us to connect, people with facts to the world.
So expanded global connection, really. Diane, e-commerce has also experienced a very rapid expansion. What have you noticed in that space? And in particular, what opportunities does this present for female entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs?
Thank you, Elise, and thanks WPL for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts, how we can help more women at risk. Indeed, the crisis has accelerated an expansion of e-commerce and digitalization of traditional offline businesses. It provides customers with access to a significant variety of products in a convenient and safe way. Also, it has enabled offline merchants with online channels to maintain operations despite contact restrictions. Take China's e-commerce as an example. In the first 3 quarters this year, according to China customers data, sales volume through cross-border e-commerce increased over 50%. But the general foreign trade rose by less than 1% only. During the crisis, we found those companies with access to e-commerce and digitalization can be able to survive and thrive. For example, sellers and partners in our platform have deployed digital tools proactively, sustaining their goals across key business functions. They have leveraged social marketing, such as live streaming, to generate traffic, AI and big data to adjust product portfolio based on emerging consumer needs. And the logistic companies have applied AI and big data to digitally manage the traffic capacity. And we also work with banks to lend microloans through the online channels to MISME, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, in a second based on fintech. In results, our seller sales increased by 40% in the first 9 months. But the companies without digitalization have been suffering harder. They're at the crossroads. The choices we're going to make today will have consequences on gender equality, digital equality, and inclusive growth for decades to come. And Elise, you also mentioned about how we can help more women through this digital transformation in this crisis. Nowadays, we have no doubt that many women have more and more understanding about the importance of digital transformation. However, we found them are facing many challenges along the way, especially on digital skills. Although digitalization provides everyone with equal competition and the mature technology, tools, and services are available in the market, accessing to the skills is the key problem. I still remember a voice from a woman farmer in Haiti. She said, "I've often heard the word digital platform, but never really knew what it meant and what it looked like." So for example, they always ask how to sell online, how to use live streaming, how to generate online traffic, how to access the microfinancing, etc. These are the common questions for all. They're more fragile and experiencing the problems accessing skills, technologies, and finance. And during the crisis, according to the UN, business owned by women are particularly impacted by the digital divide and are lagging behind. So Elise, I think we must change this. However, helping everyone with digital transformation is not an easy job. Instead, it requires a very strong collaboration between the public and the private sectors. We need to fully utilize our role to unite all stakeholders, including business leaders, government together, and work with multilateral organizations like B20, like UN, WHO, WTO, etc., and others to help all stakeholders navigate the storm.
Wonderful. Thank you, Diane. Christy, I wonder if you have thoughts about the gender digital divide and how that shows up in the media.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think Diane brings up a great point, which is that as much as Zoom and mobile phones are bringing the world together, those with access to information, and I don't know if you can see this, but this is a picture of my bedroom and watching us on the TV in my bedroom. These are things that not everybody has access to. And one of the stories that we've been covering extensively, primarily in the US, but it's a global issue, is access to education. So the studies are showing that students who have access to broadband, my children are children who have access to great broadband, and everyone in this house can stream work and school all day long with no problems. Those who don't have access are falling way behind. There was a study that came out yesterday that said some children are forgetting how to use a knife and fork during the lockdown period. Socialization is a huge issue. And much of the burden of caring for children while working from home is going to female partners. And all the studies are showing that women have the potential to fall behind in business, in work, and that their children will be impacted by this as well. So it's a story that we've been covering. I see it with my team. We happen to have a very flexible workplace. Our entire team was able to start working remotely in March. We have no issues with people bringing their children and pets into Zoom calls. But there are companies that have documented people not being allowed to have their children be present, or parents being told to lock them up or something while they're working, and that's a problem. Obviously, there are also frontline workers and essential workers who can't stay home, and we are very concerned in the U.S. and globally about the economic and digital divide growing due to the pandemic. So I do think from my perspective at CBS News, access to information and access to trusted information is critical. We have seen so much misinformation, and misinformation still being shared on social platforms throughout the US election. Yesterday, some of the #1 stories on Facebook were stories saying President Trump is refusing to concede the election. It's really troubling that sources of misinformation or sources that highlight things that simply are not true will continue to create not only an economic divide, but an information divide, where there are facts on one side and untruths on the other side.
We have just a couple minutes and time for maybe one rapid fire question for each of you before we go. So some have characterized COVID as an experiment for how we'll live in the future. I wonder for each of you, what is the single most exciting innovation coming out of this time? Diane, to you first.
Yeah, thank you, it is. I think the pandemic has rapidly changed our behavior and the business toward online channels. And the shifts are likely to stick post-pandemic. From my point of view, digitalization has been the trend to disrupt every industry. Let me share the trends in international trade industry. We have seen two significant trends that we maybe benefit from. First, a shift to digital services trade from the goods trade. Digital services trade such as cross-border e-commerce, smarter logistics, e-finance, and online integrated marketing service, etc. They can help global economies achieve faster growth, enhance businesses' competitiveness, and promote skills inclusiveness and gender equality. Looking at a global level, under the pandemic and the global economic slowdown, digital services has still maintained growth, and its contribution to the international trade has become significant. And the second, a shift to decentralized e-commerce from the centralized model. During the pandemic, social media and live streaming have derived the new norm of e-commerce. We call decentralized e-commerce. Sellers no longer distribute products in one single e-commerce platform. Instead, they utilize multiple private domain channels, such as social media, social community, and live streaming to sell products to their end customers. And every channel is a form of decentralized e-commerce. Let me give you one example. Maria, a Texas-based Zumba instructor, quarantined and lost her income due to the virus, but she's been able to survive through decentralized e-commerce. She has introduced Zumba leggings and tops from our SaaS platform to her fans in Facebook group. And once her fans place orders from her channels, we would drop ship to her customers, and she can earn money from selling products through her private online community. She doesn't need to understand the trade policies, operations, and logistics, but focusing on Zumba skills and managing her network. This simple business model has enabled everyone access international trade equally and boosted international trade to the next level. Elise.
Diane, thank you so much. I'm afraid we are out of time. Christy, I wonder if you have in one word the single most exciting thing.
You know what, for me, I'm very lucky. The single most exciting thing for me is that I've been able to spend more time with my family and less time commuting. So I've rediscovered the joy of eating breakfast with my children.
Here's to that. Thank you both so much for this conversation. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and now we're here in the studio with a wonderful guest, Thorey Williamsdottir Prope, and she is the founder of the Empower Journey and a passionate adventurer. And Thorey, in the past years, when we had the Reykjavík Global Forum, you always took a group of women leaders who attended the forum as conversationists to go for a short swim, a dip into the Atlantic in November. I have to say, I never dared myself, but those who've done it say, well, and you live here. I mean, you had many, many years. Anyways, I never dared, but those who have done it, they said it's a real revelation. So what is it for you? Why do you go into this super cold sea in a super cold month?
Well, revelation is probably the right word. You know, I started sea swimming, 4 years ago or something? So it's like only, you know, it's a short while since I've done it. And I always thought that people who did it were crazy. Mm-hmm. But now I'm so passionate about it because it's an amazing feeling to go into the cold water. And it's like, you know, you enter the water and you get this strange feeling that you want to run back. But if you like get over it and you just continue swimming, and when you come up, everything, all your worries, everything is just gone. Uh-huh. And, you know, and you feel fantastic in your body because it's like you have run like 10 kilometers. Mm. But you've only been in the sea maybe for 5 to 7 minutes in really cold water.
Yeah, this would have been my question for how long is a real swim, but 5 to 7 minutes is quite some time.
I'm talking
already.
about 5 to 7 minutes when it's like in November.
Okay.
And, you know, the people who have, you know, well, the women who've been with me from the forum, like Christy Tanner, who was here in the session before, they are really brave because they've gone in for like a few minutes in like a 3 to 5 degree water. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's I think that's just like, it's addictive, you know. Mm-hmm. I sometimes say that I'm a nature junkie. Mm-hmm. This is part of it, this passion for the sea. But in the summertime, we swim much more. Then I'm like maybe for an hour or something in the sea. And then we go and swim, you know, like certain lengths. It's really nice.
Talking about long swims, I mean, Hannah just recently told me that you have also crossed the English Channel, so the channel in a group of women swimming through it. And that, of course, is quite a long swim. I mean, it's not 5 to 7 minutes, that's several hours.
Yeah, it's 34 kilometers. Mm-hmm. But actually, we swam 40 kilometers because of the currents. You had really strong currents. Mm-hmm. So it was an all-women team. We were 6 women. And we decided to take on this challenge. And we also were making awareness of the environment and the health of the sea and plastic pollution. So we used the moment to do that and raised, well, a lot of money for a local fund that is fighting against plastic pollution. And it was really, and it was also very, very empowering to do it with a group of women. Because I'm just like a very normal middle-aged woman who decided when I was 43. I am. And then I just decided that I wanted to take on this challenge. You know, it's just like, it's a matter of setting a goal and just like training and be part of the training with such a great group of women. That was also quite a journey, and I loved it.
Well, I mean, we talk about trailblazers here, and adventurers have not really, at least in history books, there are very, very few women adventurers. It tends to be sort of a description of male adventures and male achievements, even though when you now look closer, there are, of course, female adventurers. And this nature adventures, which bring you, in a way, also to the limit, right? I mean, there surely are, when you swim 40 kilometers, moments where you think, oof, is that really...
They've done more, this group of amazing Icelandic women. They have crossed the biggest glacier in Europe, Vatnajökull, that is our glacier, if you like. And what is nice about this also, and so empowering, is that women in Iceland follow this, and it's also always for a good cause, either on the environment or on cancer. So it's always sort of for a good cause, and we follow this live. We're seeing how are they doing, are they moving fast, and how. So when Thorey say that he's a regular middle-aged, I mean, the regular one like me would just be sitting in front of the computer.
Well, speak for yourself.
Sort of watching how fast they move. So it's been sort of a movement. And one can even say that the women here in Iceland are now using nature more and more as a gym, if you like. It's sort of everything that has to do with it. But what is also interesting, and maybe Thorey, you can sort of relate to that a bit. I mean, you're also the founder and owner of the Empower, which is a company assisting other companies and institutions and sort of those that want to expand on gender equality, and how that is connected to the empowering part of using nature for these amazing journeys, if you like.
Yeah, well, it's partly a part of my Icelandic women power gene that is really have been putting me towards this direction, both as an adventurer and as now owner of Empower, which links, because we are really in the forefront, as we know, and that's why we are here. And that's like more of the macro environment. We have great policy, we have great regulation, so all the infrastructure is right here. But what we are doing is that we are looking more at a microscope into the companies, into the institutions, the organizations, and we are guiding the leaders of the companies towards gender equality and helping them to find all these challenges in the culture that are really hindering us. There are so many challenges that are hindering women to progress within industries. And we have been doing this in different sectors, and now we're working with the Parliament, which is a very exciting project. So we are kind of using creative ways. That's right, we're using nature also. We are international consulting company, so we are bringing organizations and companies here to Iceland when allowed, which is not now, but hopefully in the spring. So we are bringing people here and also taking on the challenges of both the Icelandic nature and the culture.
And we can maybe, Silvana, make a pledge, should we? The pledge would be that we go swimming in the Atlantic November next year with Thorey.
Yeah, I encourage you.
Thank you very much, Thorey, and I'd love to hear about the Icelandic women power gene. That's certainly something to further research on. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And with that, over to you, Olga.
Digitalization is transforming economies and governments, and technology can be a tremendous tool to make rapid progress. But what does a digital society look like in reality? And what are its impacts on people's lives? In this session, Martin Brucknow will interview Kersti Kaljulaid, the president of Estonia, on how digital societies can be an ally for advancing equality and equity and for addressing global challenges such as sustainability and climate change.
Welcome, everyone. I'm extremely honored to welcome here with us today Her Excellency, the President of Estonia, Kersti Kaljulaid. Madam President, when I think of Estonia, the first thing that comes to mind is Skype, and then Bolt, and then TransferWise. These are some of the most successful digital unicorns in Europe. Estonia was, of course, also a pioneer of e-government and more recently of e-citizenship. So this just shows very clearly that Estonia has arguably been the most successful country, or at least one of the most successful countries in Europe, in terms of having gone from a relative economic laggard to one of Europe's digital leaders. And what's really exciting is that you have been part of this story from the very beginning as an economic advisor to the then Prime Minister in the late 1990s. Now, would you tell us what's the secret of success here that other countries may be able to follow and learn from Estonia?
Yes, and interestingly, the answer is not at all related to technology. Estonian society does not separate into private and public sector. People who are always in the private sector, people who are always in the public sector. And as we know, at the turn of the century, I mean, you had online banking, most bigger companies had intranet models and systems. And when Linnar Viik, the digital advisor to Prime Minister Laar, and me coming from a bank moved to the Prime Minister's office, we really didn't understand why on earth in public sector we are not taking advantage of these technologies. So we took, as simple as that. Ma ei tea, mina ei kuule neid enam.
Hello, can we hear each other?
I can't hear you.
Do we hear each other?
Now I can hear you again. I didn't hear you.
Excellent. So now that you hear me, excellent. So, I mean, this is really fascinating. Sorry. So this is fascinating, and I'm sure that this digital technology and e-government must have somehow also helped in terms of advancing equality and equity in Estonia. Is that the case? And if so, can you give us a few examples of how these technologies can actually really make a difference here?
Well, first of all, if all the services which we need in our life, which relate to the government, are online, then they are not available only from 9 to 5 and possibly also with the lunch break. So since it is mostly, unfortunately, women who apply for school places, for kindergarten places, for social services, all this is normally women who administrate these kind of work. This can be done in Estonia in the evening when your children are in bed. Also, because you have all these services online, women who process the other end, who offer these services, they are also less linked to geography and time. And I believe that this coronavirus crisis, which now has shaken loose all our economies, has made the rest of the world also to realize that 30% of the jobs at least can be done wherever and whenever. And it was possible already for at least 10 years. Simply, companies, enterprises failed to recognize that this is the case. Now they have had to do it. And this gives women tremendous opportunities to, for example, match your working life and your home life when you have small children. Because if you can work from home and if you can work while your child is very small, you are not watching on maternity leave how your classmates and university mates are getting their first places as heads of units and directors. Just one example.
That's fascinating. If I may move to a slightly different topic, and that's global warming. I mean, clearly, once we have resolved this corona crisis, this is going to be and remain a #1 challenge for our societies for the coming decades. So where do you actually see the role of digital technologies and digital government in terms of accelerating this transition to carbon neutral economy and society? And is that, in fact, is there a role for the digital, or do we just need to put more money into science, or is the problem somewhere else? What should we be really focusing on?
Well, definitely there is space for not only digital technologies, but what we already have as digital technologies can hugely help us. For example, here in Estonia, we have smart grid, electricity grid, which means that each and every owner of a house or a flat, they can watch how much electricity they have been using in real time. And this means that in principle, we can guide through apps, of course, nobody's going to do this manually, the peak consumption. And we calculate that we can shift 20% of the peak consumption off, which means that you need 20% of a less of generation capacity. Huge saving, in fact. On Nord Pool, you can already trade today with electricity, saved electricity, which was not used during the peak times. So this is one example. The other example is that when we think of the goods market, then nowadays we shift quite a lot of goods around global. If you separate production into design and engineering, which is actually a service, not a good, you can offer this from wherever globally. This also is, well, great advantage, a global services market to design my shoes or to design an airplane part. And then you simply need to find the closest plant which can print these things out. This is already happening, was already happening before the corona crisis and the trade difficulties, because regionalization of production was already ongoing.
So many countries are trying to build these smart grids. How did you actually achieve it in Estonia? Was this government driven? Was it private sector driven? Was it a combination of the two?
Actually, our grids are owned partially by private sector, some grids, local grids, and some are owned by a state-managed company. So it was a joint effort also from the citizens' side to make sure that everybody is on board. Unfortunately, we see that since we are a nation of 1 million, I mean, we are not an interesting market, so the app development has been slow. So anybody who wants to try out the system for developing applications on smart grid, then please welcome to Estonia. I am quite sure that a few unicorns, well, we can fit in.
Yeah, well, I'm sure this has also been a blessing in disguise because since you're a small market, your entrepreneurs have always focused on Europe as a whole and have been phenomenally successful in that. I mean, speaking of cooperation, I hope I'm not revealing any secret here when I say that you're now running for the Secretary General of the OECD, which is very exciting. And I believe this would also make you the first female Secretary General of the OECD, which would make it even more exciting. Now, this sort of multilateralism hasn't really been much in fashion, arguably, over the past few years. So, you know, where do you see a role for quote-unquote old-fashioned organization like the OECD in today's world, and particularly given these challenges, you know, whether it's digitalization, climate change, and I'm not even going to go into the political and geopolitical challenges?
OECD's strongest element is its ability to analyze and understand the trends, make them visible by calculating. So, for example, if we notice that our services market is going global, you need to understand, I mean, how many people who have moved to independent working are actually digital nomads? How many people who work on our market provide their services globally from third countries? And based on this analysis, OECD can now make policy suggestions on how to, for example, make sure that those people who work in 5 different countries at the same time can easily pay their taxes, choose their, well, safe dock where they pay taxes and how to get services. Another example, in climate change, we are seeing that the European Union, but also other markets who are responsible, they are executing market distortions, which should lead us to creating the space for green technologies. Somebody needs to analyze these market distortions, whether they are protectionism in disguise, whether they are working, whether they are, I mean, put in place with good intentions, but simply not failing. Another clear example. Third, technology is changing all our education mechanisms and systems. Our children learn technology as they go, but they are actually missing out on social skills. They also know different things compared to us when we went to school. Their knowledge base is not function of age, but age and internet access and interests. How to teach such a generation so that they are not bored in the school, but they would also gain the necessary skills of being a compassionate human being. We need not only to measure in PISA the level of knowledge of children, but also the variations in this knowledge, for example, again, to expose the trend which we all know exists. And based on this trend analysis, member states can choose how to react for the better policies for better future.
It's a fascinating vision, and we all hope you'll get an opportunity to put it into practice. Unfortunately, for the moment, we're out of time, so we will have to say goodbye. But thank you so much, Madam President, for joining us. Best of luck in your future endeavors, and thank you everybody else for viewing, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Throughout the forum, the Power Of segments have featured personal stories and reflections from which we all can learn and gain inspiration in our own personal leadership journeys. So far, we've heard about the power of collaboration, cleanliness, sport, resilience, religion, and loneliness. In this next Power Of, we will hear from Drew Kataoka on the incredible power of art.
Art is a powerful force. It makes aggressors shake, and it holds the powerful to account. In 1937, the small town of Guernica was bombed. 1,700 innocent villagers were killed and maimed. The artist, Pablo Picasso, heard of accounts like this. A sight that haunted me for weeks was the charred bodies of women and children, several of them huddled together in what had been the cellar of a house. The air was alive with the cries of the wounded. I saw a man crawling down the street, dragging his broken legs. Pieces of people and animal were lying everywhere. In the wreckage, there was a young woman. I could not take my eyes off of her. Bones stuck through her dress, her head twisted right around her neck. She lay, mouth open, her tongue hanging out. I vomited and lost consciousness. So what did Picasso do? He created one of the greatest artworks of all time. Guernica is a 25 by 12 foot painting portraying the hellish suffering of human animals and bodies, twisted, tormented, contorted, dismembered, and burning in the flames. But who cares? I mean, isn't it just a gray painting? Well, yeah, a gray painting that scares people. In fact, a little over 10 years ago, it scared one of the most powerful men on the planet. At the time, U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell was about to give a speech promoting the war in Iraq at the United Nations, and the backdrop behind him would be a big reproduction of Guernica. Fortunately for him, some people on his team realized that this would be a big problem. Unfortunately, their solution to this was rather comical, which was to cover it up with blue cloth. So it went like this. They silenced the painting for a moment, but ultimately, the painting won. I'm an artist in California, the CEO of Drew Kataoka Studios, an art studio based in Silicon Valley, but with a global footprint. We create for clients and collectors in over 30 countries. And for us, the works of Picasso, the works of the great artists of the Renaissance are an inspiration. Art can and should be a force for good. Over the summer, I was horrified by the footage of the brutal murder of George Floyd and so much police brutality on television. I had nightmares, and one morning I woke up with an image of the American flag, its heavy cloth, rippling, animated with the whispered breaths of those brutally murdered. I texted my friend, Reverend Bernice King, the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., and I asked her, what do you think about an online protest for those people who want to go out and show their support and protest, but can't because of distance or health restrictions? She texted me back in 12 minutes, and 72 hours later, we had begun. So we organized 7 days of online protest in collaboration with the King Center in Atlanta. I created a digital artwork based on that dream that I had had, and it became the poster for online protest. Participants included thousands of men and women and young people on the East Coast, the West Coast, across the country, really around the world. But also celebrities like Steve Harvey and Alyssa Milano and Ben Stiller, and stars from the NFL and Black faith leaders and CEOs. Friends of mine, Chelsea Clinton and Wynton Marsalis, joined on board, and The Tonight Show and Ellen DeGeneres and The Ellen Show featured online protest, shared the message through the medium of television and social media, spreading it to millions. But most importantly, petitions were signed. Thousands of calls to politicians were made. Now, there are so many goals that we have, and we haven't yet accomplished all of them, but sometimes change is a process. A very different genre of work that we create at Drew Kataoka Studios are our ambrosias. The ambrosias are multidimensional reflective sculptures that are like living organisms, constantly changing. Complex and filled with visual loops, they never look the same, and it is even hard to retake the same photo. But I'm proud that these artworks have also been a platform to amplify ideas around globalization, the Sustainable Development Goals, women's rights, the environment, racial identity, gay rights, and creativity. We have some big problems looming on the horizon. So let's not forget, we have something essential in our arsenal that we must make use of. Art is a powerful force for good.
In 2014, award-winning author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie published We Should All Be Feminists. Inspired by this acclaimed essay, we now welcome the New York Times' Francesca Donner for an interview with Guðlaugur Þór Þórðarson, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Development Cooperation of Iceland, speaking live in our studio for a discussion of why all of us, including men, should be feminists.
Hi there, good morning from me, good afternoon to you. Thank you for giving me a couple of minutes of your time. I wanted to actually begin this conversation with a challenge. Looking at Iceland's diplomatic priorities, gender issues like women's and girls' rights, LGBTQ rights, combating discrimination and elevating equality are already on your list. You have consistently ranked at the top of the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index. Why not follow the lead of Sweden, Canada, Mexico, and others and formally adopt a feminist foreign policy?
Well, when it comes to more foreign policy, gender equality is in our DNA. And I think it's more important to take action than talk. And it's regardless. I mean, because everyone in Iceland has a lot of jobs. I'm a Minister of Foreign Affairs, but also when it comes to development programs, defense and security, and trade. In all of these sectors, gender equality is a key. So we feel that we are doing those things, and we are championing gender equality. I think it's much more important than, obviously, you mentioned that we are on top of the list when it comes to this index. And it means for us, it's a big responsibility. And we want to lead by an example. And I believe that we are doing in many ways. And we have been fortunate when we look at Iceland that I think if we're going to take one thing out of it, is that we did have the first democratically elected female president. And she was and is not only a woman, she was also a single mother. So during the time she was elected, there were two things that people were using against her. And she showed us all that by leading by an example, how gender equality is important. And actually, I've heard many, I'm not joking, I've heard many people say, when Reagan and Gorbachev came here in 1986, they first realized that men could also become president.
To go back to my original question, though, so do you feel that adopting a feminist foreign policy would be more, is it more talk than actual action? Are you saying that Iceland has the action, but maybe doesn't put its stake in the ground and say, we are formally doing this?
We are definitely, I think we are everywhere. I mean, we're not just talking about it, we are putting it into action. There's no secret. This is gender equality is something that is in every part. I mentioned defense and security. There is gender equality is a priority for us. Development programs. Gender equality is a priority for us. When it comes to trade, gender equality is also a priority. And we are always embracing and putting on the agenda gender equality. So I'm not saying I do not understand the question, but I think that we are showing by example the importance of gender equality everywhere.
Maybe you could give an example of trade, for example, or one of the other things that you mentioned of how you are putting equality, gender equality first and foremost in those areas.
For example, when it comes to free trade agreements, and also on the WTO, we have an initiative in WTO that we should put into the address gender equality in the trade agreements. And for us, it's very simple. We, of course, and we do it also when it comes to human rights and other things that you mentioned, we are fortunate to be a small part of the population of the world, which takes things for granted, take values for granted, which others are not as lucky to have. So we are promoting them everywhere we can. And actually, because you mentioned trade and economics, then when it comes to economic growth, the nations who have more economic growth, no more gender equality, usually have more economic growth. So for us, it's every area. When it comes to defense and security, then it's extremely important that you also have half of the populations taking actions, taking decisions. And actually, it's very important if you, for example, if you're going to have peace in some areas which are which you have wars and other things, it's very hard to achieve that without women.
Right. Recognizing, of course, that no country is perfect, not even Iceland, could you name one or two areas of focus that you feel specifically need more work and talk about what you plan to do about it?
We are far from perfect. We are just trying to share what we have, what's been a success with us, and we are trying to learn from others where we are not as good. If you're going to mention a few, we have, of course, glass ceilings. We have glass ceilings when it comes to the largest firms in Iceland, for example, that they are, I think, 20% of are led by women. And of course, we have endless of challenges everywhere. And the day you take things for granted, like gender equality, the day you get complacent, then you're going to go downhill. There is no doubt about that. But I mean, this is a never-ending. I don't know if you're going to say a struggle or just a task.
Right, completely. And actually, I was thinking about complacency because when you're at the top of the Global Gender Gap Index, how do you avoid complacency? And I feel like you answered that question by saying, never be complacent. But do you have anything to add to that?
Well, we do have strong, not only women, but fortunately also men, because you're never going to achieve gender equality if boys and men are not active. But we have very strong advocates for gender equality who constantly reminds us of. We have, for example, one who is in organizing, and many of them who are organizing these events, just to take one example. But I think that I think what you can say, I mean, if we have achieved something, is that, of course, things have changed a lot in the last few decades. And there is no political force, no political party in Iceland who wants to reverse or go back. And that says something.
Yeah. And so, I mean, to take it back to those glass ceilings that you mentioned, what do you do about that? Quotas?
That's one of the things.
Example, yeah.
Quotas is one thing. Of course, we have done a lot of things. It's not only that we have had a lot of strong, great females who have been the leaders and led by an example. And it's not only a famous person. For my personally, I never understood this debate because I was fortunate that my mother, she was at the time when usually women were working at home. She was, well, you could say at that time was a career work. When she quit at the municipality, then her job was split up to two, and there were two men who took that over. And so I never understood the question. And I was also fortunate that my father, he was also a very strong person, and he was never, no, he also had the self-belief that this didn't annoy him, even though my mother had a higher pay and so on. So I believe that we do have it in our DNA, and the reason I do believe it is that when I listen to my kids, because they have so much knowledge and feelings for these important things.
Interesting. You know, I think we can all agree that men should be feminists, but how do we make them so? Yeah, clearly, you grew up in a very special household, but especially when many women themselves don't count themselves as feminists, what do we do with young boys and men and children who aren't necessarily growing up in a household that promotes equality, or whether it's a role model of a mother working or whatnot?
Well, I mean, all ideas need to be spread out, and you need to show the example. I think, for me, it's very important that we are aware of that gender equality, there are no losers when you achieve gender equality. There are only winners. It's a win-win game. Then I come back with who in Iceland wants to go back. We don't want to go back for obvious reasons. So I think, to be honest, because I've spoken about gender equality both home and abroad, and then sometimes I see a little bit frightened in the faces of the men I'm talking to. I'm trying to explain them, you're not going to lose anything from it. You're only going to win. And I think that when people realize that, and we do it by showing facts. I mentioned economic growth, but many other things. I mean, who wants to go back and say, okay, let's say men, I didn't want to spend all this time with my kids. I don't think that anyone wants that seriously. But this is, you could say, common sense, obvious things, but you need to point it out. You need to work on it, and we need constantly to explain things which are maybe very simple, but unfortunately, the largest part of the world is not enjoying the things that we do take for granted.
Right. And really, it sounds like backing it up with data and fact is kind of your approach. I'd like to end with a personal question, if you don't mind. I know that you're a father of many. When I was preparing for this, I was listening to quite a few videos and going back in time, and I found something in that Hanna Birna Kristjansdóttir, forgive my awful pronunciation, said back in 2019. She said that she really experiences gender equality when at night her daughters call for their father as much as for her. And moving to the personal, I'd like to ask you, when do you really experience gender equality?
Well, when I talk to my kids.
And?
Well, it's a question I really need to think about it, but we usually take most things for granted. And I think about my kids, if they were asked things that maybe I was asked, at my young age, do you think that women can do everything men do, and questions like which you don't have anymore, I think they would laugh. I mean, my wife, she is an entrepreneur. She has run her own business very successfully since her early 20s. And my kids, I think they obviously do not think that those, I don't know, I would say traditional, or at least the old-fashioned way when it comes to mother and father, it's something that is real in their life. So, because you mentioned Hanna Birna, which is both a pioneer and a great female leader. I think she's right there, and I think that this is something that we all are experiencing.
Brilliant. Next year, I think we bring your kids up on the stage and we put them to the test. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your thoughtful comments. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
We all know that women have been severely impacted by COVID-19 across nearly all dimensions of their lives, from their health to their safety and security, to their family lives and economic well-being. At the same time, women are also on the very front lines of response efforts. As a community of women leaders, how can we build back better? What can we learn from our previous experiences, and what is the role for women in this time of recovery? We will now hear a special address by United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed on how women leaders are driving the recovery from COVID-19.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my honor to join you at the Reykjavík Global Forum today. I'm inspired to see so many women leaders collaborating on global solutions. This pandemic has asked each of us to rise to meet the health, humanitarian and development crisis, as women leaders around the world have answered the call from the front lines, saving lives and livelihoods. In recent decades, we have made some important strides towards gender equality, including in lessening discriminatory laws, furthering gender parity and education, and increasing women's participation in the labor force. However, even these gains are at risk by the devastation brought about by the COVID-19 crisis. As a result, women have been among those most impacted by the economic consequences and unemployment. Women's unpaid workloads have risen, gender-based violence has increased, and access to sexual and reproductive health have become compromised. These imbalances have devastating consequences. An estimated 11 million girls will likely be forced to quit their schooling before the end of this pandemic. We know that the role of women in decision-making positions is essential to a successful global recovery. And that is because when women are equally represented, the outcomes are better for everyone. In governments around the world, women leaders have been effective in flattening the curve and positioning their nations for economic recovery. And yet, the numbers of women in management and leadership positions continues to be far too low. It is for this reason that the Women Rise for All initiative was launched earlier this year as a global advocacy effort. Women Rise for All engages women leaders who can advance our roadmap for social and economic recovery from COVID-19. We, as a global network of women leaders, are rising in solidarity to lead a recovery, not a return to an old normal, but to more equal, inclusive, climate just and resilient communities of the future. In that spirit, it is my pleasure to introduce a video of some of the inspirational women leaders participating in the Women Rise for All. Thank you. Like no other time in recent history, women are on the front lines of COVID-19 and bearing the brunt of this human crisis. They are the first responders in hospitals and clinics, leading in science and research, and on the front lines of politics and communities.
I Rise for All because COVID-19 has exposed in a glaring way the inequalities of our society.
For all people who seek truth that is founded in metrics, compassion, and the rule of law.
No one alive today
has ever faced a global health crisis on the scale of COVID-19.
Now is the time to support our international system to act.
We are in the middle of a major global crisis. The coronavirus knows no borders.
The togetherness that is necessary to beat this pandemic has become part and parcel of our ethos.
I'm rising in solidarity with other global leaders because I can see the long-term consequences of this human crisis.
We all face the same enemy, and we stand to gain by bringing the full force of humanity together to fight it.
The novel coronavirus reminds us all just how interconnected our world is.
In our global village, solidarity is the only option.
I focus on bringing the faces and the voices of the marginalized groups into the center of the response of COVID-19 and beyond.
Truth matters and helps to unify all the world.
Let us do better. We have to recognize that each of us have talents, each of us have specific conditions that make us different. But it is in our diversity acting together that we can win these battles.
We must address the gender impacts on the COVID-19 pandemic in our response and recovery packages.
These solutions can be found right here within our communities. They know better how badly their life has been impacted.
Let's not waste this moment in time to really react to combat COVID-19.
Working together to prioritize the needs of the poorest and the most vulnerable people around the world is essential to ending this pandemic once and for all.
Global institutions and governments must work together because we know that if the virus remains active somewhere, we cannot be safe anywhere.
Ensure that our recovery is inclusive and sustainable. The Sustainable Development Goals must be our compass.
We can do it working together, but we need to respect each other, to see each other, to hear each other, and to work together.
Learn from this human crisis to recover better by building back better together. My call is simple. It's our turn.
Throughout this year's Reykjavík Global Forum, we have looked at women's leadership from many angles. For example, how to challenge perceptions, elevate the visibility of women's leadership, and drive progress on key issues within our societies. Now we take an even closer look and ask, what does women's leadership look like, and how can women achieve political power despite all obstacles? Our next session will bring to life the newly released book by Julia Gillard and Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, entitled Women in Leadership, Real Lives, Real Lessons. Please welcome Julia Gillard and Michelle Bachelet in a fireside chat that takes a closer look at leadership.
Hi, my name's Julia Gillard and I'm delighted to be in conversation with Michelle Bachelet. Earlier this year, with my good friend, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, I launched a book called Women in Leadership, Real Lives, Real Lessons, and Michelle was one of the 8 women around the world we interviewed. Michelle, since we spoke for the book, women and leadership has been the topic everywhere. How are you seeing women in leadership during the days of the pandemic? Have women leaders done better?
Well, I think the women have done fantastic. I mean, you know that the people have said that from the 12 countries in the first wave of the pandemic that did better, 7 of them were led by women. So I would say many of those stereotypes about women being weak or not taking important decisions are completely false, of course, but they have been shown in the COVID-19 response that that women had done it fantastically. And I think we need more women in leadership positions.
One of the things we talked about was how women leaders combine strength and empathy. And that's not because women's brains are somehow different from male brains, but because when people are giving women permission to lead, when they're saying, I'm prepared to vote for that woman leader, they're often looking for that combination of strength and empathy, which seems to very much have come to the fore during the pandemic for women leaders and been incredibly valued. And we now have research which shows that objectively women leaders have done better. But Michelle, one of the interesting things we talked about when we were talking about the book was comparing your 2 periods of time as president. Not many people in the world are able to, in a time series, say, my first period as president, my second period as president, but you are. And you said to Ngozi and I that you thought things had got tougher in some ways for women when you compared your second term of office with your first. Why was that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think things have get tougher in politics for men and for women, but particularly because women are usually more discriminated. Any decision that you do, you take or you don't take, they will be criticized. So I think it was worse because in my first term, well, there was this the novelty, you know, I was the first woman president in my country, and people did not expect much, but on the other hand, the second term, they expected a lot. And I think politics in general is getting a little bit more nasty. There's a lot of, you know, I would say criticism, but not, I mean, there's a lot of lack of state perspective, if I may say, and women, of course, are treated in a worse way. You see it everywhere because you see as well that even though 25 years ago in the Beijing conference it says women's rights are human rights, but I will believe that for women has been much difficult in the last years.
Hillary Clinton, who of course famously said that at the Beijing conference, women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights, we also interviewed for our book. And one of the things that she spoke about is the impact of social media. And when we were putting together the research for the book, it's quite clear that of the things that are said about politicians on social media, disproportionately the worst of it is directed at women politicians. Did you experience that during your presidency? And what do you think we might be able to do about that?
Yeah, I mean, I did experience it because, I mean, first as a candidate, I experienced it that they will discuss not about my ideas, what the programs I wanted to do for the country. They will discuss if I was too big or the size of the purse. And I've spoken with a lot of women who have been prime ministers, and probably Julia, in your case, it was the same. They discuss about secondary things, not on the substance, not on the essential things. And I mean, I don't care if somebody criticizes me because of my ideas, because it's normal. That's a democratic way of relating to each other. But when they discuss things that are not important, they tend to diminish the figure of a woman as a leader, and to I would say to put the person like if it's a thing and not a person, with ideas, with intelligence, with capacities. And I think it's a very sexist way of relating to women. And I lived that, of course, during my candidate and, of course, as a president as well. Because if I did not took a decision immediately, because I thought you need to think really in a very deep way, you need to analyze it, you need to consult a lot of people, because it's a very complicated issue. They will tell you that you don't do decisions, you don't take decisions. If you took a decision very quickly because you thought it was so necessary, they say you improvise. So I would say that for women it's never very easy, because they will always try to find a way of I would say, bringing down your ideas.
You're certainly right. Both the research and the women leaders we spoke to talked about disproportionate time spent on appearance questions, what women were wearing, a lot of commentary about body shape. I had that myself from every aspect of my body, including, would you believe, my earlobes, and a lot of focus on women's family structures, whether they have children, whether they don't have children. I mean, interestingly, Jacinda Ardern has gone on to be the second woman in the world to have a child while she was in office, and she's just been very solidly re-elected. So fortunately, we've got that role model, but these questions still come to the fore for women. And the research shows as well that people can react very strongly against a woman who is perceived to be ambitious. If a man says that he wants to be a leader, that he's aiming to be president or prime minister, he's seen to be a go-getter. But if a woman does that, she's seen to be too self-seeking. People respond against that adversely. Do you still see evidence of that around the world?
Yeah, I think so. But it's worse than that, because girls are usually, when they are growing up, they learn that ambitious is a terrible thing. It's not a good thing. Power is not a good thing. I mean, so many girls don't dare to go into, to even think of being leaders or being a president of the republic, because they feel that is ambition, power, as a bad thing. And of course, I think it's less than before, probably, because we have seen a lot of very powerful women and a lot of girls going into the streets, like the Me Too and so on. I think we have seen women that believe that they have to be in charge, that they need to their voices to be heard, and that's a very positive thing. But I think we need to ensure that girls, when they are growing up, that they can understand that that's not a bad thing. That power is not the problem. The problem is how you use the power. What do you use it for? That it's good to have power to transform the world for the better, for example. And I'm not sure that in schools we are really teaching girls like that. And I think we need to do much more of that.
In my capacity as chair of the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's College London, we've been studying the pandemic and its implications for women. We're also studying the difference women leaders make, the sorts of policies and priorities that they bring to the fore. So you're right, it's not the power, it's what the power is used for. And the evidence shows that women do tend to use that power to make a difference in a way that empowers other women. It's fantastic that this important conference is hosted in Iceland, because of course that's one of 2 countries in the world that can say it's had 3 women lead it, and it's a proud leader on gender equality. But Michelle, to sort of wrap it up, what are your standout lessons for women who are aspiring to be political leaders? What advice could you give them, or perhaps what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
Well, I think probably, I don't know if I know more now than what in terms of what could I say to a young woman who wants to get involved in politics or in his country's destiny. I would say, please don't give up. Don't give up. I mean, sometimes it's very nasty, sometimes it's difficult, but I mean, we women can live with difficult things. So don't give up. Just be convinced of what you believe in, and work hard, and you will have other women who will support you, who will mentor you, who will be by your side, and we need you. That's what I would say.
And would you say too, there's actually a joy in leadership, that you can do the big things that matter, that really put your values into action? I look back at my own time in politics, and yes, there were some hard days, but I got to do things that changed my nation for the future. And that is really a delight. So we need to remind, I think, that there is joy in leadership, the remarkable opportunities it brings you to enact change.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I did things that I'm very happy about it. I permitted so many young people to go to the university free of charge that would have never been the first generation in their families, and so many other things on women's rights and so on. And that's great, because you can enjoy that you were able to use the power to transform people's life for the better. And I think that is what makes it worthy.
And in this world where there are role models, where there are mentors and sponsors available, do you talk to young women about how important that can be? Have you found that mentorship, sponsorship by others really matters?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I mean, every time I speak with women, I mean, because you know what? Once when I was working in defense issues, we had a group with women who work in defense in many places of the world because there were so few women. And then there was this magazine. It says women can everything, not at the same time though. And I think you need to understand that you don't need to be a superwoman. You just need to be somebody who really believes in what you believe in and works hardly and honestly for it.
I think they're very wise words. And from my own point of view, my message, Ngosi's message, the message of the book, and Michelle, you've said it too, is to women to absolutely go for it. We live in a world where fully 70% of the nations on earth have never been led by a woman. We can and we must change that. And of course, it starts with investing in education and the development of girls, but it also requires us to confront these still sexist moments in politics, the gendered issues in political leadership that stop women coming to the fore and being the leaders. My standout lessons would be, number one, go for it, but be aware. Be aware that you will still face a gendered world where there will be times when you are just judged simply because you're a woman. You're judged more harshly because of that. Use the opportunity as you get ready for leadership to think about how you will deal with those moments when they come. Forewarned is forearmed, and the experience of leading women like Michelle Bachelet can help guide women for the future. Michelle, just a final reflection for a woman who becomes a leader and hits that moment where she's treated in a sexist fashion. Should she call it out?
No, I think we women need to go forward, as you said, Julia. And the important thing is that we can help those young women in that path.
That has been a delightful conversation. Thank you, Michelle, for having it with me. And thank you for all of the work you continue to do to inspire women and girls around the world. It would have been fantastic to be together in Iceland, but this is the next best thing, sharing perspectives and lessons about women and leadership. So thank you so much for joining me for this discussion.
Thank you, Julia. All the best.
Thank you.
Welcome back to our conversation states, and we are so thrilled and so honored to have with us the First Lady of Iceland, Eliza Reid. She is like a total icon for us women here in Iceland. She is super powerful. She is sort of outspoken about the role of being a spouse to a head of state. She's also seriously personal. She has this way of making sure that we feel at home when she's sort of talking, although she's not originally from here. So it's a great honor. And thank you so much, Eliza, for all your continuous support to making this event happen. It's great to have you with us. How was it to actually come from, I mean, Canada is your home, and Iceland, of course, now is your home.
Yeah.
How was the transition?
It was interesting. I think the hardest thing were the dark winter nights, but I've lived now in Iceland for 17 years, and I lived in the UK for several years before that. So I've really spent most of my adult life in Europe. So I'm quite used to it, and I love living here. I'm so proud to serve in the role that I'm able to serve in now, and it's a great pleasure. And I think Iceland, Canada is a pretty good combination.
It is a great combination, but you've taken what has really been interesting for me, sort of working on the international scene and then discussing with you, because the role of a spouse, of a head of state, can be challenging. And you've told me yourself that you like the first lady sort of phrase sits with you as a feminist and a spokesperson for gender equality and women's rights, to sort of, you're a little bit uncomfortable with it, if you like.
Yeah, it's a very strange role to be in, of course, because it's a very undefined, informal role that yet comes with all kinds of expectations with it. And at first, I think that intimidated me because I wanted to do things in the way that I was supposed to be doing them, whatever that was. But as you say, I'm also a feminist. I also think gender equality and empowerment of girls and women is so important. And, you know, there's this strange irony that all of a sudden I was in the spotlight because of something my husband had achieved. But then I thought, you know, in life, we get presented with all kinds of opportunities through all different reasons, and it's really up to us what we're going to do with them. So I sort of overlooked that, and I thought, all right, if I'm in the spotlight, what I'm going to try to do in this capacity, at least, is to show that the female spouses of heads of state aren't just sort of policy muses or people that stand next to their husbands, or they don't have to be that. They can use the position to use their voices to express opinions, and so I've been trying to be very active in that capacity.
We have the Reykjavík Global Forum here in Iceland because we, from a women political leaders perspective, when we came here first in 2014, we're really blown away by the what we saw, what it's like to be a woman in Iceland, and what we felt really embracing the reality of having equality between women and men and living it. What was it like for you? I mean, the transition, as Hannah mentioned, but to be here and to be, well, yes, it's the European country, but it's the global leader, the global champion for equality between women and men. How does it manifest itself in your daily life, basically?
Well, I think, you know, we have this phrase in Icelandic, to see things with a guest's eyes. And because I grew up in another country, in some senses, maybe some of the things that people who are born and raised in Iceland take for granted, I think of as particularly special and noteworthy. And I've been very grateful to be here and be a woman here. But I think what I'm most grateful for when it comes to gender equality in the discussion, and I think Hannah Bitten will agree with me on this, is that when we talk about how we're proud for topping these charts on gender equality, the thing that everyone says afterwards is but. Because topping the charts doesn't mean that we have achieved it. In fact, we have a long way to go to achieve it. And if this is as good as it gets, that's really maybe not all that impressive. And I think the fact that we are aware of that women and men in Iceland are aware of that, and that we as a society, I think, we've reached the tipping point where we're not trying to argue whether or not gender equality is a good thing. What we're trying to do is figure out how we're going to get there.
Yeah, I think these are, yes, super important issues. I would also like to you had this career, and you still have your career. I mean, you in international relations, you've been a journalist, you are the co-founder of Iceland Writers Retreat, so you do all these amazing things, and you are now writing a book with sort of, so you have this all sort of in alignment with what you're doing, sort of servicing your country. And we were talking about it earlier, me and Silvana, how sort of literature and writing about things sits with the nature of Iceland and the sort of complexity of light and dark and all these issues. How do you see this?
I think, you know, Iceland is a storytelling nation, and it's called the Saga Island, and the Icelandic sagas are things that we're very proud of, and there's a long tradition and culture of telling stories. And in our stories, we have a lot of strong women. There's a lot of strong women role models in those stories, which has had an impact on how we've dealt with gender equality as well. And so one of the things, you know, when I co-founded the Iceland Writers Retreat was using, being able to introduce people from abroad to Iceland's rich literary heritage. And then we have another phrase in Icelandic about that everyone is walking with a book in their belly. And I never thought that I had a book in my belly. And then it turns out that maybe I do. So I'm writing this book right now about what it's like to be a woman in the world's best country to be a woman. So I'm profiling a little bit different aspects of that.
Well, we look very much forward to launching your book in one of the next Reykjavík Global Forums. Would be fantastic. I don't know, we don't want to put you under time pressure for this, but what definitely would be most interesting. And I mean, your reference to the Iceland being the country of the sagas and everybody has a book in the belly, which is a really wonderful expression. So what makes you, I mean, when you have your retreats, your writing retreats, you go into nature and you have those special places where you want to connect from nature to writing. And how does this serve for you as an inspiration in your writing, but also like what do you see happening in this writing retreat?
I think when we run the event, we take people on these tours of the natural sites of Iceland, which is obviously very appealing for foreign visitors. And we see too, the weather can be very extreme here. That's very inspirational, whether it's snowstorms or hailstorms or things like that. But I think really what people also go away from is not just the nature, which is maybe something that they knew about before they came, but this respect for culture, this respect for the written word, this respect for sharing our ideas and our souls with other people that just Icelandic society has overall. And certainly the overseas participants that we've had that go away, they really leave with that feeling. They think, I like to write and I'm a writer, and everybody here in Iceland bears a lot of respect for that. And they think it's great. They don't say, how can you possibly earn a living doing that? Or something like that. And that to me is very rewarding, being able to run the event in that sense.
Going back to just kind of final question, because we're almost out of time here, but just with your concept of first ladies, first spouses, and you said once to Hannah that you'd like also to your role to encourage women to go into politics, and I mean, we know why, but what is your what's your motivation behind that?
I think I was very fortunate growing up to have very strong female role models and women in my family who I was raised to know that I could do whatever I wanted to do when I grew up. But I don't think that everybody necessarily has that privilege. And I realized that role models are incredibly important. And we need women at the table. We need women at the table to be having their voices heard, to be helping to make decisions, to be helping to allocate the money and the funds to help with what we need. And that's why forums such as this, I should say, are so important for us to be able to make those connections, and for people, for men and women, for boys and girls to see how vital it is that we have this dialogue and that we invite women to the table.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being such an amazing role model yourself, and all our best to Guðni, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It can be said that women have held the world together in 2020. The following session will focus on the next logical question. Will they have a fair shot at shaping the post-COVID society? Specifically, how can women leaders shape pandemic response, and how can governments and the private sector take action, including in the area of childcare, where women take on the majority of work? Please welcome conversationists Melinda Gates, Sanda Ojambo, KK Salaya, teacher, and Nancy Kanjugira for this important discussion.
Hello and welcome wherever you're watching from. It's wonderful to have you joining us for this very important conversation about women after the pandemic. Now, 2020 has been a taxing year for everyone, but the impact of the response to this pandemic on women and their lives all around the world has, in some cases, had devastating effects. Women have really stepped up and helped to keep the world together in this difficult time, everything from childcare to healthcare to national leadership. But just how much say will they have in shaping the world after the pandemic? That's one of the key questions that my two guests today are very well placed to answer and give insight into. I'm joined today by Melinda Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She, of course, is setting the direction and priorities for the world's largest philanthropy. Also joined today by Sanda Ojambo, the Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact, and that's a UN initiative that is steering businesses towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. But before we get to our conversation, I'd like you to watch a message from a woman who has a couple of nicknames. Her name is KK Shailaja Teacher. Now, teacher is one of her nicknames given to her because she used to be a science teacher. She is currently the Minister of Health and Social Welfare for Kerala State in India. And she recently earned herself another nickname, the Coronavirus Slayer. And this is because of her incredible contribution towards preventing the spread of coronavirus in her state. Let's watch this clip from her now and hear what she has to say about the role that women have played in fighting COVID-19.
the grassroots level workers involved in fighting the pandemic in frontline is predominantly women. This includes over 66,000 women workers in the field level belongs to Women and Children Department. And more than 27,000 field level workers belongs to Health Department. And also 4.3 million self-help group workers called Kudumbashree, which also belongs to government. Moreover, more than half of the local self-governments were led by women leaders here. And they have led the fight against the pandemic, exploring all the opportunities and fighting all the challenges of governance and administration. In addition, 9 out of my 14 district medical officers were women. I hope that in the post-COVID era, this would reflect as more opportunities for women in all aspects of building a new world. Thank you.
So we've heard there from KK Shailaja. She is the Minister of Health and Social Welfare in Kerala State, India. And I must mention, she's on a list in this month's edition of Vogue India of the Women of 2020, because her contribution to the response to this pandemic has just been so huge. Now, Melinda, if you can start by setting a stage for us in terms of what you think about the way this pandemic has impacted women, because I saw something that you echoed when you said this pandemic might be gender blind, but it's not gender neutral. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we know that COVID has exposed all of the cracks in our society. It's not just affecting our health, it's affecting our economies. But we're starting to see, finally, it's in our face, the racism and the sexism that's in society. And so women's lives and livelihoods are being drastically, for instance, affected. They're losing their jobs, at twice the rate that men are. And so when we look at this pandemic and we look at how are we going to get through it and how are we going to build back, we have to have women with seats at the table. 70% of our frontline health workers around the world are women. And yet, if you look at these COVID task force, the WHO's emergency task force, 20% of the leaders on that are women. If you look at our current COVID response in the United States, 10% of the task force is women. Now, the new administration is going to get that up to 40%. But what we know is that women have a holistic view on society. As the minister just said, they are the ones who are out, who are living the frontline work, who are out doing the grassroots work. So we need their leadership at the table to figure out how to get through this pandemic in the best possible way for everybody.
And Sandra, just picking up from that and thinking about where we find ourselves today, is there a chance that we've actually gone backwards? Because as Melinda hinted at, there is that very gnarly fact we have to deal with, that women are dropping out of the workforce at a faster rate than men. So with this pandemic, are we actually going backwards?
Thanks, Nancy. And I just really want to echo Melinda's comment that certainly the pandemic has not been gender neutral. As has been said, women have been at the forefront of the response. But if we just go a notch deeper and look at the other impacts that COVID has had, look at education. At a time when for most of the world, those who could shifted to digital learning, in a world where already women and girls were marginalized from education, think about the double effect of that, where there's also no technology. I think firmly millions of young girls and women have had educational opportunities simply shut down or cut short because they weren't able to jump onto this digital age occasioned by COVID. And certainly in the economic front, women drive the backbone of the SME sector, and across the world, millions of SMEs shut down, millions of workers lost their jobs at this point in time. So not only did we have the dual effect of women being upfront as nurses, caregivers, and store clerks and all of that, but at the same time, many women fell backwards. And I think this has been said at the global level, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. You know, we started off a decade of optimism, the decade of action for the Sustainable Development Goals. But sadly, COVID has slowed down much of that progress. And so the rebuild and, you know, building back forward really has to take cognizance of all of the inequalities that have arisen and the gender gaps that continue to exist around the pandemic.
But Sander, what's your pushback to businesses that say, well, this is about practicality? In a situation where women are earning less in a household, they may be the ones who have to drop out in order to look after the children. This is an unprecedented situation. Some of these are practicalities. What are the things that we could do to take away some of those arguments that actually push the issues that affect women to the periphery?
Yeah, you know what I'd say is I think that the pandemic has given us a unique opportunity for reflection, for a reset. And what it has shown us is the fragility of business as a whole. And a lot of that fragility has been occasioned by the fact that decisions have been made that were never inclusive, that were never sustainable to begin with. And I think if businesses really do want to look at a long-term future, it is time to take into consideration a lot of that. Inclusive business decisions result in inclusive outcomes. And it really is time to move that forward. I think a lot of the unpaid work that women does really does need proper compensation. We need proper safety nets for society. We do need proper childcare. We need to ensure there's proper education. But more importantly, I think we need a really good review, as a lot of the economic stimulus packages are being debated and deployed, to really look at how these packages will be inclusive. And that inclusivity must have gender and women at the center.
And Belinda, I'm interested in what conversations you're having about the implications of this for areas like healthcare and childcare. If we look back to the Ebola outbreak between 2013, 2016, some lessons to be learned there perhaps, because the death toll for mothers and babies who weren't able to access proper care during that time was actually just a little bit higher than the number of people who died from Ebola itself. So how do we avoid replicating some of those fallouts with this pandemic?
Yes, so what we've learned from the Ebola pandemic in the four affected countries in Africa was that you get these shadow pandemics that go alongside of it. So you get increased domestic abuse because more people are at home. You get more maternal mortality because women don't go to the healthcare facility. They're afraid to go for good reason. So we can look at all these knock-on effects for women and we can take action now. You're seeing the world come forward and say, these are domestic violence numbers now. In Paris, they set aside grocery stores and pharmacies as places that women could go and report domestic violence. Canada set aside hotel rooms. You saw other countries say, hey, we're going to have shelters women can go to if they were in Africa. So those are some things you can do on the domestic violence front. On the health front, you see countries like Ethiopia saying, okay, women aren't going to feel comfortable coming into the health system, so we're going to make sure they get clean home birth kits out to them and to the traditional midwives so we can get ahead of this. So that would be my response on the health front. But the other issue you raise, which is enormous, is, as Sanda said, the unpaid care work that women do. We need to recognize as a society that all of our economies around the world are built on the backs of women's unpaid labor. And so we have to look at that. There are 1.5 billion children out of school right now, and that work is disproportionately being borne by women. That's why they're dropping out of the workforce. That's why when the jobs do become available, they're not going back in as quickly as men. So there are things we can do. Governments can make sure there are robust paid family medical leave policies and early child care provisions. Businesses can make sure there are flexible work hours and paid family medical leave. And media and businesses can also, in civil society, change the norm about what's expected between work and childcare. We care about our children and we want to work to have income. We need to balance society and make the norm that all of this work doesn't just go to women.
And I suppose a question that follows on from that is what comes first? Is it the policy or is it a change in attitudes that needs to shift. I remember seeing at the start of the pandemic, when all this panic buying was starting to happen, one of the popular tweets was someone saying, oh, I can't find toilet paper because Susan and Karen have stocked all of it, for the next 20, 30 years. And even there's an implicit, an implicit message that it's the women who do the shopping. It's the women who do the caring. They're the ones who are going to be looking after the elderly who need care. They're the ones who are going to be looking after the children. So is it a matter of changing attitude before policy, or do these need to happen at the same time?
I would say for sure at the same time. And that's why, as Sanda has indicated, and as the minister who was on video earlier indicated, you must have women at leadership places at the table. They will make those changes. They will say, no, make this policy change. And by the way, I'm a leader, just like we're going to have a future female vice president who's of color in our country. Young girls can look up and say, hey, that's a norm change. I've never seen a woman in a vice president role. You can do both at the same time, but women have to have those leadership positions to help us make those changes and even make the changes in our media messaging.
And Sanda, if we pick up from that, there was a little bit of talk about the countries that had women leaders doing better in terms of managing coronavirus. People were pointing out that countries like Finland and Germany that had female leaders, in New Zealand, seemed to have a more caring and cautious approach to leadership. Now, obviously, we don't want to generalize based on the actions of a few extraordinary leaders in extraordinary circumstances, but does this tell us something about the kind of society in which women can rise and the kind of outcomes that you can have because of that?
Yeah, and I'll pick up on that and just really go back to the question about inclusive decision making and the results that come out of that. I think results have shown, in the business sector, that when women are at the decision making table, outcomes and decisions certainly are different. And I do think that there is a reason and a rationale for having strong leadership, and strong leadership is not made of just one gender. And I think certainly this COVID pandemic has shown us some great examples of female political leadership, female business leadership, and female community leadership that has resulted in immense success and transformation in and through COVID. Now, what I hope for is that we saw this in a pandemic situation with a lot of urgency around it. But this is something that we need to embrace and do every day. I'll just go back to my point. Having inclusivity really does result in different outcomes.
I'll just push back on that a little bit. Why has this not happened yet? Because we seem to know these things in theory, but in practice, it sort of falls apart. Why don't businesses have more women leaders?
Well, some of this is structural, some of it is cultural, some of it is the fact, as Melinda said, even when an opportunity does exist, a woman is not able to take it up because she has domestic work, she may be trying to pursue a job and study late night to get a necessary degree or a qualification. We just need to take cognizance of the fact that there's a number of factors that are structural barriers to perhaps getting women at the table, but all those barriers can actually be dismantled with a firm and concerted effort around it. Some of it requires policy examination, but some of it is actually very practical business decisions that we all need to make. And I think I'm glad to be in an organization that aims to challenge some of these orthodoxies through principles, through partnerships, and just demonstrating the best that we have in business leadership.
So these fault lines that have been exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, Melinda, you call yourself an impatient optimist. What's sparking optimism in you with regards to what the COVID-19 pandemic can teach us about the role that women are playing in our lives?
Well, one thing about this pandemic is it is in our face. We are home. We are all home. We're not out, working in society the same way we were before. And so this unpaid labor is right here in our faces. And whether you talk to male congressmen or senators or female ones or members of parliament, they all see it. The global leaders see it because it's in their homes. Somebody has to help the kids with their schooling online, make sure the laundry gets done, make sure the kids are fed. So if we can look at this moment and say, instead of saying that these gender issues are nice to do or sideline issues, They are not. They're the crucial issues. And I am optimistic because the pandemic has exposed this. We can't turn away from it. And if we're going to build society back, we're going to have to take advantage of this opportunity and say, no, 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 gender is front and center. And the Generation Equality Forum that's going to happen in June of 2021, is 25 years on since the forum where Hillary Clinton said, women's rights are human rights are women's rights. That is going to be our moment. And so if these action coalitions come together, particularly one of them on economic justice and rights, that's a place you can take up childcare and talk about unpaid labor. And what I'm optimistic about is people coming together, civil society, the private sector, and government. I will do this with our foundation, say, what specific commitments can we make on behalf of the world to build back better? Because in my view, equality cannot wait. This is our time, and this is our time to put it front and center and not say it's some nice to do issue. And we have the data finally that shows us that it's not a nice to do issue. Sandra talked about it a bit in business. We see it in the private sector, but we finally have the data now to make our argument and make the case so that we make the right economic investments and policy decisions.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Sandra? What do you feel that you can do within your organization and that others can do, businesses specifically? One of the refrains in this time has been listen to the experts. How do we make sure many of those experts are women?
First, I want to broaden the notion of who an expert is. As Melinda said, we are all at home now. Who is the expert in domestic issues? I think, if anything, everything is being spread by everybody. Kids get the chance to see parents at home probably doing roles that they probably never saw traditionally at this point in time. I think the expert is the person who is committed to delivering a better future. And those exist at multiple levels. They exist at community level. There's fantastic community workers who are really driving forward great transformation work. They certainly do exist in business. And what our commitment is to really ingrain key principles around gender equality in business and make sure that we can grow those principles through our footprint across the world. As Melinda said, equality really cannot wait. And this is truly the chance to have that step change in the way businesses has viewed the gender discussion. Also taking a very broad look at gender. It's not just having women around the table, it's what they do at the table. It's a type of conversations they can have at that table and the shifts that they can make. So we're looking for, optimistically, some holistic changes in the roles of business and the roles of women in business.
I think that's a great reminder that what's good for gender equality is good for the economy, is good for society in general. And women aren't just victims of a broken world. They can be the architects of the world after COVID-19. Thank you so much to both of you, Melinda Gates, Sandra Ojambo. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks for having us, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy.
Leaders must reflect the societies they represent. Diversity in leadership, as in all areas of society, is essential for representative decision-making and for thriving communities. For the Reykjavík Global Forum's final Power Off segment, let us now turn to Janine Kugel on unlocking the power of diversity.
Hello and welcome to the session. We always speak about diversity, and many people believe that diversity is just a buzzword, but it's not. It is actually about who we are as human beings, and we are different. We're different in gender, in religion, in sexual orientation, in age. We are having different cultural backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds. We have disabilities or not, etc., and so on and so on. Those diversities are mostly a fact, and we can't do much about it. But we bring all of that different experience to the table if we are asked to. And that is where the beauty of it lies. Because when you think about it, if you have diverse teams, it makes things much better because you bring in the experience and you bring in that different thinking and you bring in these different backgrounds. Let me speak about monocultures. Because when we speak about it and when we think about agriculture, we know that monocultures don't really work. Farmers will have to think about like what they are growing on their field. Because if they grow always the same things, then it won't grow anymore. The plants need to be changed. And the same happens in organizations as well. Organizations that are very monocultural are less innovative. They are less productive, and they actually also don't bring better results. So what do we need to do about making that and bringing a change into the picture? The issue is that human beings, we love monocultures. And you know why? Because we like people that are just like us, that are similar, that maybe come from the same country, maybe went to the same school. Then we think, oh yeah, okay, I know you have the same way of thinking and all of that. That is nice, but it doesn't make things better. Because what we then actually have in psychology and sociology, people speak about the so-called mini-me syndrome. You know, looking into similarities of people and believing that those similarities are better. And there's another thing that we have, and that is a bias. Conscious bias and unconscious bias. The tricky thing comes with the unconscious bias. We are not aware of that. You know, when I heard about unconscious bias for the very first time, it's quite a while ago, I thought, no, that cannot happen to me. I'm a Black woman. I know what discrimination means. And then I made a test that I can strongly recommend. Harvard Implicit Association Test. And then you actually realize we all have a bias. And there's a good and easy explanation to that as well. Our brain gets 11 million bits of information every second, but we can only process 40 of them. So that means that our brain makes a lot of shortcuts. And sometimes it's actually necessary that that brain makes a lot of shortcuts in order for us to survive. But we have to realize that we have those biases to be able to overcome it. And I think this is a good beginning. If we are aware of that, we can actually think, okay, I know I have a bias, and still I need more diversity, and I need more perspectives to really gather the complexity of the world that we're operating in, to really gather all of those different perspectives, to get up and to come up with the best solution. And there is another thing that is very important also to figure out about that, because working in diverse teams is not always easier, because different perspectives bring a lot of complexity in there, a lot of discussions and arguments. But if you have 30% of the people in the room that bring a different thinking into the room, miracle comes into place. First of all, you accept more different ideas. You listen to each other. Monocultural bad jokes are not made anymore, and microaggressions shrink. This is why in a lot of diversity research studies, we always speak about the 30% of the magic, or 30% for quota. And if we take all of that into consideration, we know very clearly diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice.
Each day at the forum, we've been presenting two of our 2020 Women Political Leaders Trailblazer Award winners. These awards recognize both incumbent and former women presidents and prime ministers who are breaking political glass ceilings and reaching the highest echelon of political leadership. I'm now pleased to turn it over to Silvana Koch-Merin and Hanna Birna Kristjánsdóttir live in the studio to present the final two 2020 Trailblazer Award winners.
Thank you so much, Ragnar. And now we move into a section that has become part of our everyday here in Iceland, the Trailblazer Awards of WPL, where we recognize outstanding women that have broken the glass ceiling in so many areas. And we introduced, yesterday we did introduce Mary Robertson,
Joyce Banda.
Yeah.
And before Anna Solberg and Michelle Pialui from Haiti.
And this is something we do every year. And as we have told the audience earlier, we do this in cooperation with the Council of Women World Leaders. We would really love for this to be a bigger group with more women involved, but it takes time. But I'm really pleased to be introducing our next award winner for the Trailblazer Awards, Laura Chinchilla, the president of Costa Rica.
I am very honored and humbled to receive the WPL Trailblazer Award, which in the past has been granted to female political leaders from around the world. In times of crisis and distress, like the ones we live in, the conditions of leadership are being put to the test. I am convinced that now more than ever, the world needs the compassion and commitment that stems from women's leadership in order to build back more equitable and inclusive societies. Thank you, Reykjavík Global Forum 2020, for being a champion of women's rights.
The reason why we do these award ceremonies, why we want to recognize the trailblazers in politics, is, of course, that we need role models. We said before, you can be what you can see. So if you see a woman as head of state, a woman as head of government, that then encourages you. And for example, my daughters, who are teenagers, they have always seen Angela Merkel as the head of government in Germany. So for them to think it's not possible that a country like Germany has a woman running the country is just not part of their reality. So it's absolutely crucial to do this. And Iceland is super proud of having the first ever elected women, female president, female head of state. But the fact that she's still alive is wonderful, of course, yeah. But it just also shows how recent of a phenomenon it is that women get to these highest echelons of political power, which is quite a crucial thing to remember, because we do need to speed up things. If we go at the current pace, it will take another couple of 100 years, according to the World Economic Forum's data, until we get to parity, that as many countries are run by women as are run by men. So we continue giving awards to those trailblazers to encourage women to step it up and to take the seat of the table, because we need them there, we need them to decide. And that's then over to the next award winner, the Prime Minister of Namibia. This is amazing. We have really women leaders from all continents this time to be awarded with our Trailblazer Award. We have already mentioned it, but let's mention it again. At this Reykjavík Global Forum, we broke a very sad world record, meaning we brought together the biggest number of women presidents and prime ministers for a meeting. And if you look at any of the international big gatherings, you see that there are more men in this picture than at this world record gathering here in Reykjavik. So Hannah, from an Icelandic perspective, you have 2 prime ministers as women already.
Yeah,
you had a female president.
And I think what you're saying, Silvana, is so important for girls and women around the world. I mean, we are of the same generation, and even, I mean, I was brought up in Iceland, but I rarely, and I was like this political interest from early age, and I watched on TV, and I rarely saw women. So again and again, we're faced with this sort of mental block of us saying, I haven't seen any woman being on stage when it comes to these issues, meaning that this is not the place for me. So again and again, we're trying to remind girls that this is exactly their place and they should be there as well as the boys. So I think recognizing that is super important for girls, and we need to do it because, again, as we mentioned in the day before, when people close their eyes, they see men as leaders. But I also think it's vital, and this is why we have been celebrating the partnership that we have with the Council of Women World Leaders on this, is to cherish the ones that did this before us. To say we are grateful, we thank you, and we think you've set a really, really great example for the world to follow.
Oh, absolutely. And that's also why we're so proud of our Masters of Ceremonies, because Raga, for example, she was a minister, and the other MCs that we had in the past 2 days were also very outstanding women leaders, sometimes in politics, sometimes else. We want to showcase them, and we want to show that these are really strong women. So with this, over to you, Raga.
Power has many sources. Many aspects of life can serve as fuel for our ambitions, enriching our experience and our relationships across both personal and professional settings. In our next segment, we hear from Blessing Omakau on religion as a power source.
Last year, a foundation gave me funding to conduct research on the question, how can secular actors partner with faith allies to advance gender equality? I spoke to many theologians, academics, faith leaders, and faith-based civil society organizations. I spoke to people in Kenya, in Malaysia, in Australia, in England, and in America. I studied the data on the link between religion and gender equality. The data confirmed what I have long known. Gender equality cannot and will not be achieved without engaging religious partners. Studies show that religion influences not just how people think about gender, but the outcomes and realities that women and girls face. There is statistical evidence that religiosity impacts several measures of gendered well-being outcomes, even after controlling for per capita GDP and level of development. Religion influences decision makers at the micro level like employers and at the macro level like legislators. A 2015 study of 50 countries found that the impact of religiosity on gender equality is almost the same, and in some instances greater, than the impact of the share of women in parliament or the share of women in the labor force. As I shared these findings in a strategy meeting with the foundation funding this work, someone raised the question, well, then what makes you optimistic that religion can be a catalyzer for gender equality? I told her it's the stories of the people and the organizations I had interviewed. It's women like Hawa Ibrahim, a women's rights lawyer who has successfully defended over 40 women, some sentenced to death in Sharia law cases. Her weapon, the very same tool used to condemn these women, Sharia law. It's women like Zainab Anwar. Her organization Musawa advocates for the reform of Muslim family laws. Musawa's resources are used to train students, activists, and policymakers, and to review countries at the United Nations. It's faith-based organizations like Uniting World. With funding support from the Australian government, this organization developed a gender equality theology program. The program challenges men and women to examine their beliefs and behaviors about gender norms. It has led to several churches adopting gender equality doctrines, condemning gender-based violence, and supporting women's faith leadership across the Pacific region. It's groups like the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians. At the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis across the African continent, this Pan-African ecumenical group offered outstanding leadership at the grassroots level, training religious leaders and others on the link between gender injustice and the spread of HIV/AIDS. Currently, this group is addressing the intersection of religion, climate change, and the environment. It's institutions like the US-based Hadassah Brandeis Institute that is broadening contemporary understandings of Jewish women's lives, history, roles, and experiences. What I didn't say that day is that it's also women like my mother, See, my mother is a religious leader in Nigeria, and every month and week, her church supports hundreds of widows, orphans, prisoners, and students. She is often with the sick and bereaved. It is a tasking job, more so because she is a woman leader. But whenever she is tired or needs clarity on anything, she gets on her knees and begins to pray. Her faith is her fuel. This morning when I woke up, the first thing I did was read my Bible. And a verse that stood out to me was from Proverbs. It said, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed. Like my mother, my faith is my fuel." Earlier this year, while I was conducting interviews, I spoke with Dr. Layli Maparian, a thought leader in the Baha'i faith space and the executive director of the Wellesley Centers for Women. Something she said has stayed with me. She said one of the things that religious people bring is a belief in a higher power that can propel them to do almost anything. It's a resource, a different resource that can drive social change. This resource just hasn't been studied. There are many women and people of faith on the front lines of the fight for gender equality. I know this from my life and my work. And these people and organizations are doing outstanding work, often with little resources and not enough visibility. My challenge to you today, to you in government, you in think tanks, you in civil society, in foundations, in academia, in the private sector, to anyone working on solutions to advance gender equality. Find these people and organizations, find them, listen to them, partner with them. I truly believe that religion is the greatest untapped power source for gender equality. Thank you.
Democracy is the foundation of healthy, prosperous, and equal societies. And societal demands have made a deliberative democracy a must. But where is the future of democracy heading? And how do we create societies that are more actively engaged in democracy? In this next session, Anu Bradford will interview Dubravka Suika on the future of democracy in Europe, including the important role of women leaders in shaping democracy.
Good afternoon and warm welcome, Vice President Suika. I am delighted that you are joining us today for this conversation.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to this forum.
So this past week has been a big week for elections in the United States, but I wanted to take you back to 2019 and the European elections, where more than half of eligible voters casted their ballot. So that was a tremendous vote of confidence in democratic process and the importance of citizen participation. I was wondering how you think the EU should be taking this legacy forward.
Thank you for this question. This legacy of turnout in May 2019 is for European Commission very important. This is the reason why we decided to organize a conference on the future of Europe, which is not only one conference, but a series of different fora, different conferences, which will be a sort of deliberative democracy. We saw that citizens want to have their say beyond elections, not only once in 4 years, not only once in 5 years, but they want to have their say and they have to be included in policy making. So we realized that it is important to have this conference. We hope this will take 2 years. And we hope it will start by the end of this year under German presidency, and it will land in 2 years' time during French presidency. So we don't think that we have to. We don't think that we have to abolish representative democracy. This is to complement representative democracy, because we understood that there is a gap between us politicians and citizens. So we want to narrow this gap. We want to come closer to citizens. We want to talk to everyone, irresponsible of someone's age, of someone's roots, of someone's residence. This is of someone's gender. So this is the reason why we want to approach each and every citizen of Europe during this exercise. This is very complex exercise, and we think that it should be very open, inclusive, and transparent. These are the principles of our conference, and each and every citizen could have found a way to be part of this conference. The topics will be chosen by citizens themselves. We will be here to listen to them, and in the end to try to translate their ideas, their hopes, their concerns, their proposals into concrete policies. So to make their ideas tangible, in order to make them be a real partner in policy making. So, as you know, democracy is a matter of trust. Nowadays, people sometimes feel left behind and they start blaming democracy itself. But it's not democracy to be blamed. We have to improve our democracy. And we will try, as I said, to narrow this gap. And we will try to, of course, to give feedback to our citizens after these deliberations. So this feedback will be the benchmark of this exercise. So feedback to citizens. It will be different from citizens' dialogues, from different conventions. So we would like to make citizens feel that they are part of democratic processes of policy making. Since I was mayor of Dubrovnik and I was serving on a local, regional, national level, I was member of parliament in Croatia and then member of European Parliament for almost 7 years. I can understand the citizens, and I was always trying to be as close as possible. So politics is not any more business as usual, and democracy cannot be taken for granted. So we have to improve it. And this is the reason why the European Commission, European Council, and European Parliament will sign joint declaration. And after this signature, this will be the starting point. And then the intention was to launch the conference in physical, but as you know, epidemiological reasons don't allow us to start it physically. So we think it will be started in a hybrid way or online, but the Commission has prepared the multilingual digital platform, and everyone could approach this, would be able to approach this platform and to in order to express his or her views. As I said, we want to come to each and every corner of Europe, to come to each and every citizen, regardless of their political affiliation, and regardless if they are, we want to reach out to those who are critical to the European project, to see what is the problem, why don't they agree with our ideas. We will try to be as close as possible. Sometimes our citizens don't understand how Brussels works, but we want to come closer and to try to make them involved into the process. This is what the President Ursula von der Leyen, from the beginning of this Commission, asked me to do on behalf of Commission. As I said, topics will be open. And one more word to conclude the answer to this question. There are many priorities, as you know, digital and green, of course, together with demographic change, but health becomes little by little a very important topic. Nobody could have imagined this last year on December the 1st when we started this commission. But nowadays, I think that health will be one of the health will be prominent and dominant topic during this deliberation process.
Thank you so much. Vice President Soika, I really appreciate how you emphasized the role of citizens in this process and how inclusive of a vision of democracy you outlined. I wanted to ask a little bit more broadly, beyond your own portfolio, what are the priorities that you see and want to set for the future of Europe?
So, of course, I'm not working only on this conference. I'm also working on a democracy action plan, fake news, on disinformation, but this is also to be connected to priorities regarding health. As you know, today, Commission adopted an agreement, or we authorized to order 300 million doses of vaccine from BioNTech and Pfizer, and we also have another 3 contracts. So once vaccine would be approved by European Medical Agency, we will be ready. We are also working on national vaccination plans, which are also very important. As you might know, the distribution of vaccine will be very important. So this is our top priority at the moment, being in the mid of this COVID pandemic. This is very important. But one more thing to mention is that yesterday, our negotiators agreed with the European Council and Parliament on a very big historic package on new generation EU, new recovery and resilience plan, and a new budget, 7 years budget, which is 1.8 trillion euros. This is very important package which will help our member states and our citizens of Europe to recover from this crisis and from this pandemic. So these are 2 very important issues which we are dealing on, regardless of our portfolio, because this is the essence of this moment.
Thank you so much. I think you have outlined an incredibly important and ambitious vision that European citizens can really relate to. So, Vice President, I want to thank you for the important work that you do, and I want to thank you for taking the time to come and share your insights and be part of this important conversation in Reykjavík with us.
Thank you for having interest in Commission's work, in my portfolio, and in gender equality too, which we haven't mentioned, but it is self-understandable. So thank you once again for having these topics high on your agenda.
Let's move on to some of the initiatives, very exciting and important initiatives that we launch here at the Reykjavík Global Forum. And one of the important ways of addressing what's wrong in the world is visualizing it. So there is no better way actually than to highlight what's wrong in the world than by visualizing it. And that's why we do every year the Women's World Atlas. And the 2020 edition we're doing together with McKinsey. And on this Women's World Atlas, we show the world map. But only countries that qualify, so to say, for being on the map are actually there, are visualized. The rest is blue ocean, meaning countries that have not 30% at least, or in most cases, parity of women in leadership positions, they just don't appear on the map.
Which is so important and so sort of strong. And this is why we encourage people to see it that way. This is what the world would look like if we would only count in the countries that are doing things when it comes to certain numbers in gender equality.
No, indeed. So let's look at the video.
These are some amazing pictures. And as you said earlier, Silvana, it's all about sort of visualizing things because sometimes one doesn't believe it until you see it actually the way it is. Of course, there are numbers that are encouraging. We've been doing this now for 3 years, and there are changes, but there are still things that would need to be so much better. And I would also like to draw the attention to our audiences that we did in Japan at the WPL Summit, annual summit last year. We did in cooperation with UN Women a call to action where we are encouraging parliamentarians, both men and female, to sort of look into these figures and see where they can move their countries.
Yeah, because this clip, of course, was just a snapshot, and some of the maps were visualized there. Take a look at our platform where you see all the different sectors, the different categories in the maps displayed. And as Hannah was saying, on the maps that we saw just now on the atlas, it was about the political representation. And while we can see that 48 countries out of around 200 have 30% or more women in parliamentary seats, it's just 4 countries that have achieved parity,
And it's 2020.
And it's 2020, and 50% of the world's people are women, right? So, but they don't get the political representation. And the one map that was just briefly visible, so really have a look at the platform, showed the number of female CEOs in stock exchange listed big companies. So if there are as many companies led by women as there are led by men, and there is 0 country on this world map.
This is yet another sort of educational tool, if you like. That's why we're so proud of our cooperation with McKinsey on this, because of course this can also, it should be something that kids see in schools when they are sort of looking at the world map, that where we need to add in the countries to make sure we fill it like a puzzle, if you like. So that's one of our sort of really great initiatives.
No, indeed. I mean, this Women's World Atlas that sends the clear message to everybody who is in power that things need to change, and that things need to change at a higher speed than what has happened in the past. But it's for us really a kind of a wake-up call, these maps, to visualize it, and then leading this into what do we actually do about it. And one of the important initiatives that we are launching here, but which will happen next year, is an initiative that we are very proud of doing together with the Gates Foundation. And it focuses on women's economic empowerment and leadership. Let's have a look at the video. Yeah, so I only can say watch this space. The series starts next year, but it's really, really an impactful and important one. We're doing this together with the Gates Foundation, Women Political Leaders, and Reykjavík Global Forum is doing this together with the Gates Foundation. And it's focusing on really exploring the central role that women have as in the economies, as leaders, as entrepreneurs. And we will have really a good foundation starting this, as we had in this 3 days conversations, so many elements which already highlighted that, and some really incredibly inspirational women leaders being portrayed here. So there will be a specific post-COVID series, because this kind of building back better, restarting, we have the opportunity now to do things differently.
Yeah, what is I think important here also to highlight, because we're always talking again and again about this year 2020, of course, and we're talking about Gates coming in with us on this. It's also sort of in correlation with everything that is happening. We've been mentioning the Generation Equality campaign at UN Women, and sort of the initiatives around UN doing loads of things around this year, which are of course really, really interesting. And we're, of course, Silvana, saying again and again, watch the video, but it's more like a teaser of what we had prepared. So please, to our audiences, because we cannot take the full time here on stage with showing the full content of it all, make sure that you see this information and you use them for progress. And moving into the discussion of progress, but I mean, what we have been mentioning also again and again is our pledges. We would really like people to not just sort of say, I would like to move the needle, but actually standing up and making the pledge. And then we do our best to make sure that it is kept, if you like, since we follow the story. We've been doing this here at the Reykjavík Global Forum, where our partners, individuals, companies around the world say, this is what I aim to do, or governments, and then they get the opportunity next year to come again and say, this is the progress. And I think we have a teaser on that as well.
Absolutely. Let's watch the video.
Yes, yet another initiative that we are proud of here at the Reykjavík Global Forum. We, of course, encourage you to do a pledge and make sure that we don't only sit down and talk about things, but actually move the needle and take actions. And with that, having said that, we turn it over to our great Master of Ceremony, Ragnheiður Elín.
And now, as we near the end of the Reykjavík Global Forum, Women Leaders, we present an important discussion on where we need to go next. We know that women leaders are underrepresented in leadership positions across sectors. Numbers of women leaders must increase, societal norms must change. Ahead of next spring's Generation Equality Forum, this panel will feature a group of UN Women's Leaders for Generation Equality to discuss the importance of diverse and intergenerational leadership. Please welcome conversationists Angelique Kidjo, Amy Weaver, Lopa Banjari, and Annika Jane Dorothy.
Hello, everyone. I am Anika, your chair for this session. A very warm welcome to the panelists that I have with me, Lopa, Amy, and Angelique. Dialing in from Nairobi, I am pleased to be part of this auspicious panel to bring to you the Women of Generation Equality Leadership. Getting right into it, Generation Equality has provided a platform for us to renew the spirit of the 1995 Declaration and Platform for Action. Taking this further, I'm going to turn over to Lopa to start off the conversation by asking, Lopa, in the year 1995, our mothers came to us with a new dawn and a new message that women had been liberated. In the launch of Generation Equality, with leaders being the defining factor in framing the narrative globally, what message are we as women leaders in Generation Equality sending to young women and women all over the world and girls about Generation Equality? What is its defining moment and what is its pivotal moment moving forward? Lopa.
Thank you, Annika. The main message for Generation Equality is that equality in this generation now. It's a message of urgency, of radical change, led by young people at the heart of it, but focusing on intergenerational and intersectional leadership. Why? Because 25 years after Beijing and the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, we have seen change. We have seen progress. Mainly, the progress has been in laws and policies all over the world. But change has been slow, sluggish, and has done little to change the systems of the world that hold inequality in place. And so today, 25 years after Beijing, women in leadership positions across the world are only a quarter of the decision-making tables. And what we have seen as a result of COVID is that whatever inequality existed has been exacerbated, and the conditions of systemic inequality have been illuminated. So at this point in time and going forward, the message of Generation Equality is that we are bringing together a multi-stakeholder leadership cohort of women and men across the world, across sectors, joined together to accelerate the implementation of commitments made for gender equality through these 25 years, and to focus on the energy and activism of young people together with the experience, resilience, and leadership of older generations of activists, so that we have this intergenerational, multi-stakeholder collaboration for movement building for gender equality with an urgent, rapid implementation agenda and impatience to achieve change and equality now.
Great. I think we are all very anxious to see the unfolding of generation equality, because basically young women like me are looking for a new home for the new young feminist movement that has begun really with the Me Too movement. And that leads me to my next question to Amy. You know, Amy, the private sector has really received a lot of flack from society and governments and the public generally for disregarding or not creating a safe space for women, noting that we have had progress, but also noting that there's a new wave of young feminists who speak up for themselves in the workplace, but are also taxed at the same time. What would you say to them, and what would you tell other women leaders in the private sector on how to protect and create a new path of understanding gender equality in the workplace and private sector?
So delighted to be here. And my biggest advice to the generation equality comes down to one word, and it's the word that Lolo used, and it's impatience. We need impatience. We've made incredible progress over the last 25 years. I graduated from law school in 1995. So when I look back at what happened 25 years ago, it perfectly matches up with my career. Now, there have been some real movements forward in the corporate setting. The three I would point to, the maternity leave and laws affecting that have improved dramatically. Pay equity, there's much more attention to it. This never should have been an issue, but we are making progress. And simply the number of women in the workplace has increased dramatically. Now, what I don't think has increased is our view of leadership and what we're telling young women as they enter the workplace. So the three things I mentioned are three things that are easy to measure. Perceptions of leadership, that's not as easy. And I'd really like to call out Michelle Harrison at Cantor and her work with the Reykjavík Index. If you look at that and you look at what perceptions are of leadership, they're still very much following this older model. That's where we need to make the changes. And what we need is for women to come into the workplace with all of the excitement, with all of the goals, with all of the ambition, trusting in their own skills, trusting in their talents, and not being too quick to change their style, their goals to match people who came before them. I think we need the impatience and we need the confidence in our own skills to move forward.
Right. Thank you very much, Amy. And I just like to, circle back and take this conversation back to day-to-day living. And I'm throwing this to Angelique, looking at, as an African, the year 1995 really spelled a sense of freedom for African women. I mean, let's face it, some of our mothers couldn't even speak at a public gathering. But the 1995 declaration meant that equality was here now at the time. In your experience with the Batonga Foundation, working on the ground, how does generation equality create a new dawn for African women leaders at the grassroots level? What does this mean to them, and how can they take it forward?
I've always seen my responsibility as a leader to lead with action and not just words. Words are important. They lift up narratives. They benefit us as women, as African women, but we also always fell short to seeing action come out of them. Because in action, you have to face sharing power, privilege, access. With word, you don't have to give much away. I also think that we have the responsibility and should be held accountable to bridging our leadership's level with those who are living with very issues we are here talking about. Because there is women leaderships in Africa, in the African villages, as much as there is in these virtual halls of power. We are at a turning point with COVID-19 and many other crises on the continent. the pandemic of domestic violence, early marriage and pregnancy and poverty, women and girls are at huge risk of seeing those inequalities quadruple. We are not just dealing with the issue we know about, but we also dealing with the consequences of amplifiers like isolation, loss of income, etc. I think we need to be very, very clear about this. If we don't lift women and girls up now, there will be much more work and the effort will be much harder later. So as a leader, when I understood the opportunity behind the Generation Equality Forum, I decided to put my energy and Batonga's energy in mobilizing those very women whose future are at stake. First, by informing them about the forum. Most of them I talked to didn't know anything about it and what it can mean for them. Two, organizing them around clear priority that they come up with. And then using my power and access to make sure those voices are heard. And that the commitment we get at the forum match what they need. In just a few weeks, more than 700 women and youth leaders registered to be part of this because they want to be active participants in building the world into a model that works for them. And we believe in inclusion and intergenerational collaboration. And we have a new platform, a new program called Nos Voix Comptent, which means in English, our voices count. The team of that have youth leader from Benin. Our coordinator is from Senegal. We are leading by example and truly investing in horizontal leadership and collective leadership. That's where I think we can make a huge difference.
Right. That's really amazing. And we are really proud of the work that you're doing at the grassroots level. Circling back to how this really affects our day-to-day lives, noting that each and every woman's journey is different and difficult and one of great resilience in this generation equality space, the feminist space, bringing it back to Lopa as a woman leader and charting your way to this level of being the coordinator and convener of generation equality from UN Women. How does a woman in a feminist space rise up to this level? What was the defining moment in your career that made you know that this is what you want to do? And what would you tell women leaders wanting to get their voice out there heard, to contribute to this space, Lupa?
I've always said that a woman, no matter where she sits, high, low, in the middle, every single woman in the world, in positions of leadership or not, has faced discrimination. There is no single woman in the world who has not faced discrimination at some point in time in her life. Some more, some less, but they always have. And therefore, my own personal experiences of discrimination or exclusion defined defined my journey, and that I wanted to do to ensure that I had a level playing field for my own aspirations. But at the same time, realizing the second point of my motto, if you will, is that there is nothing that happens without solidarity and shared sisterhood. So I have stood on the shoulders of women who have gone before me, and my shoulders are available for women who come after me. Because it is about shared solidarity with women and girls all over the world, but also with male allies. Because gender equality is an all of society aspiration. It enables equality for every member of society. And therefore, that shared solidarity with male allies, but fundamentally sisterhood. Being there for each other and ceding space when another voice is important to be heard.
Great, that's so amazing. Great lessons there on shared solidarity and sisterhood. And Amy, you know that women in STEM, young girls coming up, understand that yes, this is a space that we are told we can conquer, we can set our foot in. They're really looking towards the women who've been there before, but really sometimes flail and don't know, how to reach out or where to start. And you are a real trailblazer in technology. So if I may ask, how has been the journey, or and also looking at the girls coming up across the world, what are we doing for girls in STEM to have them really contribute to the economy in this space?
So the STEM field is really exciting, especially over about the last 5 years, in terms of getting girls involved, excited, and connecting. And there's been a real difference in really just seeing girls think, that's me, seeing people who are doing it, seeing programs that are really designed for them and made fun. And I think people tend to forget that all of the earliest computer programmers were overwhelmingly women. But over time, that started being viewed as something that you catered to boys. The little play computers were made blue and put on the boys' aisles of the toy store. That was a deliberate shift in some ways. And we're needing to pull that back and show that STEM is something that is available to everyone, to boys and to girls. Now, I always get a little bit nervous when we start talking about STEM and really talking just about how we are bringing up a new generation of girls. That is wonderful, but that is going to take way too long. We need to make sure these doors are open to technology and to cutting edge jobs for women who are in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, and not let these generations go by. So we've got to invest just as much in those areas. At Salesforce, we're very involved in public education, but we're also very much involved in education that allows people to go online free and change their careers, which I think is really, really critical. But I did want to pause also, and something just struck me so much from both what Angelique and Lola said, and it is about having women's voices heard and the solidarity. And I think if there's one thing I see in the corporate sector that holds women back the most from continuing to go up, it's not being heard and not being seen. And some of that is due to voices, some of that is being talked over, but we can fix this. And one of the best ways is through this solidarity. And I try to challenge myself every single day, and I would ask each of you to challenge yourselves. By the time you leave work or the time you go to bed, what have you done that day to make another woman seen, make another woman heard? It can be something as small as repeating what they just said in a meeting. It can be something as small as retweeting something someone may have done to get more attention to it. But I really urge everyone in this wonderful sisterhood that Lola described, challenge yourself every single day to help make a woman seen and a woman heard.
Thank you really very much, Amy. I think what's really important in the whole space of generation equality is that we're giving platforms and spaces, safe spaces for young people, for girls, for young women, for women who are in their mid careers and want to relaunch themselves to society. I'm going to wrap this up by bringing in Angelique to just bring us into the thrusting of a woman on the national stage, on a global stage. It presents a new dawn for all of us who are really invested our lives in generation equality, in the feminist space. Please tell us, as a woman who has fought stereotypes, especially in the music industry and in breaking new barriers, what does the future look like for this generation?
I think the generation that is coming after us are really savvy and very demanding, and they know their value. And it's a different frame than where we came from. For me, the question that I ask myself is, how do we see leadership, women leadership, what does it mean? We have to really define that and be clear about what it means to be able to empower other young girls and young women to be leaders. We have to define that. And in that leadership, women leadership, there can be discrimination. We can discriminate from where the people come from. It cannot become an elite club. It has to be a place where every single person, every single woman feel entitled to be seen and heard. LGBTQ have to be part of this. There's no feminism when we leave some sister behind. There's no feminism, there's no women leadership without men being part of this discussion, as Lopa and Amy said. That's what we have to do. We have to be bold, we have to be courageous, and stop talking and fight every stereotype every time we face it.
Right. Thank you so much, Angelique, and thank you to this amazing panel. You have been great in bringing forth your personal convictions, your stories, and your lessons, and shared values on sisterhood and solidarity. As young people coming onto the stage, we are often wary because, as Angelique has said, we are more active, we are more ambitious and more aggressive, wanting things now, nothing for us without us, and all that. And we are very insistent on leaving no one behind in the LGBTQ space, in the girl space, in the young women space. And this has really been a chance for us. We look at generation equality as a new dawn for young feminists. And we hope that there's space for everyone. And we're really looking forward to the action coalitions that launch a new dawn in generation equality in the feminist space, and also creating a safe space, as all of you have said. This cannot be done in isolation with one gender alone, bringing together men and boys. And I like what Amy has said, that we do not have to wait for the younger generation of girls and boys to come up in generation equality. Let us reinvent the wheel for everybody now who's 20, 30, and 40, for us to understand really the tenets of gender equality. As young people, we cannot wait to jump on this bandwagon. We cannot wait to have a platform and a space to relaunch the 1995 Beijing Declaration and tell the world we are here now. And so I am going to sign off and wish all of you a great evening. Thank you for joining this esteemed forum with the women leaders of generation equality. Thank you.
The 2019 Reykjavík Global Forum featured a conversation between Maria Ressa and Elaine Quijano on journalism and society, politics, press, and platforms. This important session focused on journalism's role in creating a more equal society and the democratizing power of a free press. Now, 1 year later, we are pleased to welcome back conversationists Maria Ressa and Elaine Quijano for an update on this discussion of the ever-important need to maintain and defend a free press.
Maria Ressa is a journalist based in the Philippines. She is the co-founder of the news website Rappler. It is a website whose reporting often draws the ire of President Rodrigo Duterte's government. As some of you may remember, Maria joined us in Iceland last year as she awaited a verdict in a case charging her with cyber libel, which could include prison time. And Maria joins us now. Maria, thank you so much for being here with us. It is wonderful to see you. First of all, bring us up to speed. What has happened with your case since we last spoke?
First, it's good to see you again in quotes, right? But how I wish we were in Reykjavík again at a whole different time. But look, on June 15th, I was convicted along with a former colleague for cyber libel for a story 8 years ago that we published 8 years ago at a time when the law we supposedly violated didn't even exist. It's a story I didn't write, edit, or supervise. Oh yeah, I forgot that part. I can only joke about it because it is just so ludicrous. Anyway, we are appealing this. It is now at the Court of Appeals. There are 3 judges who will look at it. And then other cases have moved. There are now, I was arraigned on another tax evasion charge. So we have cyber libel, it's the first bucket, tax evasion, there are 5 of them. In order to bring these cases to court, Rappler was reclassified as a dealer in securities. And then the last bucket is securities fraud. Of course, I will fight all of these in court because I want a signature in case there are convictions, because I will fight for justice every step of the way.
Yes, one thing we know about you, Maria, you are in fact a fighter. Last year you drew parallels between what was happening with the government of Rodrigo Duterte and the Trump administration. We, of course, just had an election here in which the sitting president is not conceding, despite the fact that you have had a number of news organizations, including CBS News, project President-elect Joe Biden as the winner. I wonder if you still, though, see parallels between President Duterte's administration and President Trump's administration.
Absolutely. I mean, in so many ways, right? But the one that I look at is, as you know, technology. I look at this because what the tech platforms have shown us is that human beings all around the world have far more in common than we are separated by cultures. Journalists tend to think, cultural differences, but here you go. Social media over the last few years. Since last year, I've gone much further, Elaine. I now call social media platforms behavior modification systems. We are Pavlov's dogs. What is happening in the United States right now is extremely alarming because Silicon Valley sins have come home to roost. The fact, we've always, last year we talked about bottom-up lies, exponential lies on social media, met by top-down mimic of those lies. That's what happened with me and President Duterte. Look at the conspiracy theories that you're dealing with and failure of elections in quotes, right? These conspiracy theories were seeded, and one of the proponents of them was Russia Today. You can go to the Stanford Internet Observatory to look at how the color revolution, or what is being said by Rudy Giuliani top down, President Trump top down, all to make you believe there was a failure of elections. And here's the hard part is that real people believe this. What are you going to do? And that is what tech has enabled. So we have a lot more in common. I just hope you solve this problem before our own presidential elections in 2022.
I mean, Maria, we have, though, seen these companies take some steps, right? In the wake of this increased scrutiny, we've seen, for instance, Twitter in the United States flagging some of the tweets by President Trump when there are false or misleading claims. We also saw, Facebook CEO, though, Mark Zuckerberg, drawing criticism for saying he did not want his company to be the arbiter of truth and citing the need for free speech. So my question is, what is your sense of the steps that have been taken so far? Are they heading in the right direction?
Absolutely not. I mean, look, I kudos to Twitter because they're more aggressive, but the problem with the platforms is their design and the business model. And you can, Shoshana Zuboff, Harvard professor emeritus, wrote a 750-page book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. All of these things, content moderation, the spread of disinformation, hate speech that is going off the scale, conspiracy theories, right? We know research has shown us that lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further. Well, Zuboff's book actually shows you it goes down to the business model. They've taken what she calls our behavioral surplus, our data, and sells that behavioral data. It's not advertising in the old sense that we knew it as journalists. This is behavior modification. So there's a lot that's been written there. Sina Noral from MIT just published a book on September 15th called The Hype Machine. And he talks about how this technology trifecta, our cell phones, the social media platforms on top of this, and then the algorithms that nudge us to change our behavior, how this is an insidious manipulation. So look, I mean, we are actually looking for systemic solutions, but all of these systemic solutions mean that platforms will make less money. And that is their individual battles for integrity, right? I have since 2016, appealed for enlightened self-interest. It hasn't been enough. Mark Zuckerberg saying that, it's free speech, he's so wrong and he knows it. And now the US is going to have to fight for that. And we've already seen the division. Black Lives Matter. This is in the Mueller report. It's in the recent 1,000-page report that the Senate released, right? Both sides were played. So I don't know how much more data we need, but this report that we're working on, the Forum on Information and Democracy, I co-chaired a working group with former EU Parliament member Maritka Schaake. Sina Neural is part of that. A lot of experts all across the field. This is coming out Thursday, Paris time, 6 p.m. More than 12 major policy recommendations, 250 tactical ones. We need to take emergency action. I joined the Real Facebook Oversight Board with Carol Cadwallader, who broke the Cambridge Analytica story along with Shoshana Zuboff. And this is it. It's an emergency intervention, and we need to do this.
So, Maria, in our final minute or so, are you hopeful about the future of journalism, even as you sit here awaiting the outcome of your appeal? And in this world, is the reality now that there is no longer one objective truth, that we live in a world where there are multiple quote unquote truths that people will just pick and choose from based on their own needs?
I think that even gives too much power to the people. That's not the way I would describe our world today. We're living in the matrix. We're feeding energy to the social media platforms, and we're living in illusions. We are being manipulated. And this is untenable for democracy. This is why journalists are under attack, because we continue to speak truth to power, to hold power to account. It's also, look, Madeleine Albright has already warned about the rise of fascism, but fascism is only one thing. Again, look at the Matrix. When you watch the Matrix today, in these conditions, what we're living through, are we going to take the red pill or the blue pill? Ooh, that has other meanings, doesn't it?
It does have other meanings. I wasn't going to say anything, but in some circles, there are conspiracy theories that are precisely centered on what you just said there. But in any case, Maria, the thing that makes you hopeful, I want to leave people with a just sense of what does, as you look at this landscape, make you hopeful, particularly about the future of journalism.
People like you, journalists who hold the line. Look, strangely, even as I've been speaking of doom, which really, when I'm facing jail, it is doom, right? I'm facing it. It's also a time where we can create the world we want, right? COVID has destroyed everything already. We've been fighting these battles. It's exacerbated it. In the Philippines, power has consolidated power. Well, we can still fight. We can create. And that's the optimism, I think. We have to, every person watching in a democracy has got to ask themselves, what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? You can't just vote. You have to do far more than vote. And remember this, every generation gets the democracy it deserves. We can't lose democracy under our watch.
Maria Ressa, I am really grateful to have the chance to talk to you. I hope we have the opportunity to talk again soon. Thank you so much.
It's now time to recognize some truly inspirational women in our award ceremony. We will shortly be announcing our Power Together awardees, which this year celebrates women who have done so much to elevate the pink ribbon and breast cancer awareness. Before we announce our Power Together awardees, let's look at our trailblazers. Over the last 3 days, we have recognized 6 amazing women who have helped show us the way in powering together as women. They joined the group of WPL Trailblazer Award recipients, and let's celebrate them with this Wall of Honor video, which shows all the recipients since the awards were started in 2017. And now, as my role here today has ended, I would like to thank you all for the opportunity to be with you here today, and I hope to see you next year here in Reykjavík.
Every year at the Reykjavík Global Forum, we present the Power Together Awards. With this, we honor outstanding global initiatives that inspire people to power together to create positive change in society. This year, the Power Together Award goes to the Pink Ribbon. It was November 1990, 30 years ago, that the pink ribbon was used for the first time. And today, the pink ribbon is a powerful symbol known everywhere in the world. Wearing it is a strong statement of support for women with breast cancer, be it moral, emotional, or financial.
And dear guests, 2 times a year, this beautiful house is lit up in pink. Once in October, during Breast Cancer Awareness Month here in Iceland, and second, during the Reykjavík Global Forum in November. Breast cancer is the most common cancer in women, and the numbers are rising globally.
How much support matters, how much community matters, and how much strength one gains when knowing I'm not alone in this. This I experience myself. Sorry. Last year, if it would be for COVID, Hannah could give me a hug.
Yeah, I would.
But okay. Last year at the Reykjavík Global Forum, I was here and I was wearing a wig, long blonde hair like I used to have. And now I have my own hair back, which is great. Last year, I was in the middle of chemotherapy as I had been diagnosed with breast cancer in September 2019. Sorry. We practiced this so much, and I said I would cry, but apologies. So, since September last year, since that diagnosis, my life has changed a lot, and every woman who is on that same journey can relate to it. And actually, I think there's probably no woman in the world who does not know at least one other woman who has breast cancer. If it's in her family, among her friends or colleagues, it's really a huge, huge number of women who are having this, to deal with this disease.
And dear Silvana, I mean, this is just sort of the situation that is around this, the cancer issue, the big C word. And for all of us that care, it's super difficult for me to have to stand here next to my friend and not be able to hug her. But we had talked about that before, that cannot be done. I hug her every time via other means. So this year, this is a really, really important moment in time. And thank you, Silvana, for sharing. I know that this isn't easy, but it's still so important. And this is what women leaders do. And this is what women around the world do. They share their experience. And this is why the Power Together Awards recipients represent the pink ribbon in 2020. And those that are receiving the awards on behalf of so many women that have been faced with the issue are Nancy G. Brinker and Vigdís Finnbogadóttir. They have demonstrated the power of collective action by channeling breast cancer awareness into a simple and globally used symbol. This establishes a sense of community. It helps to provide access to health services and advance research for a cure.
And it's true. I mean, enormous progress has been made because of the tireless work of Nancy Brinker, who raised millions of dollars, and now the survival rates for women with breast cancer are so much better. Thank you, Nancy, and let's have a video about her.
Hello. It's truly an honor to receive the Power to Together award. Thank you so much for all that you do towards creating positive change in society and throughout the world. While it's disappointing that we cannot be together in person, 2020 has not been without moments of inspiration in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. I'm so pleased to join you in celebration of all that can be achieved when we work together. I made a promise to my sister Susie over 40 years ago as she lay dying that I would do everything I could to cure breast cancer. We made an extraordinary impact with Susan G. Komen, but I knew we were not addressing the whole problem. And over the years, over these 40 years, that is the reason I founded a new organization called the Promise Fund of Florida 3 years ago. The Promise Fund aims to prevent unnecessary deaths due to disparities in breast and cervical cancer by increasing access to care, early screening, and diagnosis at the largest at-risk population. We believe that this can be done by reaching out through navigators, trained navigators to bring people to care, and we can't wait for them to come to us. We must go to them. I believe the Promise Fund of Florida will become a model that can be replicated in any community, a gold standard model throughout the country, throughout the world, community by community. In the words of my great hero, Mary Curie, one never notices what has been done. One only sees what remains to be done. And what remains to be done is much work to apply what we know after all of these years of research in cancer, to apply what we know to those less fortunate and under-resourced people. It's the only way I've been able to fulfill the promise I made to my sister, fully and completely. Thank you very much for this very exciting award and appreciation for the work done over these last 4 decades.
We thank Nancy, and we send her, like we need to do to Silvana, a virtual hug in this strange time. But also we are honored to make sure that Vigdís, the former president of Iceland and the protector of this Reykjavík Global Forum, as he has been for the past 4 years, and Vigdís was one of these courageous women that used their fortune and their power to talk about their own story and take away the stigma. Vigdís had a mastectomy before she ran for president of Iceland in 1980. And in a TV interview while running for president, a journalist asked her whether it would be unhindered in her role as a president to have only one breast. To which Vigdís replied brilliantly, "Well, I never intended on breastfeeding the nation."
Vigdís would have loved to be here with us. She is here in Reykjavik, but of course she is 90 plus years old, and her daughter said she does not want her to come to Harper because of COVID. And so we just want to send her our congratulations and our admiration through these cameras, and let her know that we are so honored and proud that she did what she did and helping so many women with her actions.
Yet another virtual hug to a great woman leader, and let's close this award ceremony with a song of hope and community.
I think we first see a video on Vigdís, no?
Of course. We first have our video on Vigdís, and then we will have close with a song of hope and community. But of course, that's precisely what our former president represents.
We are very forward-thinking, I think, when we come to equal rights.
We are, of course, one of the Nordic countries, and the Nordic countries have been considered very advanced in equal rights.
Being a woman in the arts and in music, it's great to be growing up in an environment where I feel like my potential are seen, and I'm given the same opportunities as boys are.
Women in Iceland decided to take a day off, and it became world known because they proved when they walked out from institutions and everywhere, from the homes even, that women are pillars of society as well as men. It's a very sad thing that somehow society has managed to pay men better than women. And we know that it is done by labeling the work of men differently from the work of women. And that is now what women are trying to correct by working out again.
There's a lot of things that have changed, probably.
It's first and foremost the emancipation of women. There were only 2-3 women in the parliament for over 70 years. But now the miracle is that half of the members of parliament are women today.
And that is remarkable. It is not considered totally shocking that a woman could be president or something like that. Is, you know, it is so empowering.
What I've been trying to say to women is get educated if you possibly can.
Yes, definitely. And not to be afraid of speaking up and talking about the issue and trying to be educated and having a discussion with other women, trying to figure out like how you can better your community and your society.
Because through reading they get information, and through information they learn how to handle things in their societies.
I feel very fortunate growing up here and being a woman from Iceland and having these opportunities.
There is no doubt that Iceland can be a role model for equal rights in the world.
And we want to thank Vigdís, especially for her leadership and for having this conversation with the lead singer of Monsters and Men, where they are talking about, of course, gender equality. I would again like to extend the great wishes that we received from Vigdís, that is always with us in mind, and we send her our best wishes. With that, we would like to close this award ceremony with a song that we had introduced before, but now it comes, the song of hope and community around this big issue.
Someday, pink will just be a color, not a ribbon to remember, a best friend or a mother. Someday, you won't have to put a wig on, and a baseball cap will just be a hat. Not something to hide under, 'cause your hair is gone. Someday's coming in me, you gotta believe without seeing. You gotta keep going, keep breathing. When you face a day that feels like you're gonna break, lean on the ones that love you, the guardian angels above you, and think about where pink is just another color. Someday, your time will be your own time. No waiting rooms or doctor's news that make you wanna cry. And someday, we're gonna have a party. We'll pop pink balloons with people who know love.
now we come to the end of these wonderful 3 days, which were such an important date in the calendar of many of us. Many of you who have been in Reykjavík in the past 2 years noted straight away the dates of Reykjavík 2020, and then the pandemic happened. Everything was different this year, but we hope that we have managed to turn what we thought the beginning was a bit of a disappointment that we can't come together here, that we turned this into an opportunity and making the forum much, much bigger than what we would have been able to have here in Reykjavík, and also really ensure that we have conversationists, women leaders participate from everywhere in the world through our virtual platform.
And this is why we hope that we have managed to do what we really, really want to do at the Reykjavík Global Forum. That is to offer solutions, that is to provide for a great conversation and to make sure that you leave with hope. And I think that one of the challenging sort of issues around the Global Forum this year was, of course, the situation and the pandemic, but I hope that we have, with making sure that it did happen. And we were not, of course, able to have 500 women in this house, but we were able to have next to 900, I think, today,
Indeed, yes,
joining our virtual platform from 120 countries, and all of you joining for our live sessions all over the world, which is totally amazing. So we hope that we have been able to sort of present that there is hope in this challenging time, and more importantly than ever, we need to focus on the empowerment of women and girls around the world and make sure that we move the needle on gender equality.
And let's not forget, we do have the satellite, the Reykjavík satellite, because as we said before, if we can't bring you to Reykjavík, let's try to bring at least bits of Reykjavík into the world. And so in 20 countries, we have these Reykjavík satellites happening, where women leaders were able to get together, obviously complying with the local rules of distancing and whatever that needs to be done and to respect, so that the pandemic doesn't spread further. But the conversation only starts here. This is only the starting point. And as Hannah said, a lot of takeaways from the past days, be it the theme of hope, be it the theme of resilience, be it the theme of that humans are capable of adapting to many, many situations, and that we move further on. And that it also is an opportunity to rethink, do we want to go back to what we had before, or do we want to take this disruption, this really, this situation that changes everything in all our lives, do we use this as a new start for a better normal, to which we can all look forward to, also this giving us hope.
And let's also, dear friends from around the world, remember that we're discussing gender equality, and this is the base for that discussion here in Reykjavík, Iceland. But of course, we're all over the world, and on an international scene, 2020 was to be the year, as we have mentioned so often. UN Women had prepared for many, many years to make sure that this would become the year where we move into action under the umbrella of generation equality. We have been supporting that campaign here, and we encourage you to take part in that conversation where women leaders and intergenerational conversation is taking place about the needed progress. And I would also like to make sure that we say thanks. Say thanks to our great co-hosts here in Iceland, the Parliament of Iceland. The Parliament joins all of the parties that are in Parliament. They join this conversation and support this initiative, along with the government of Iceland. Of course, mostly the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We have the Speaker of Parliament joining us as well. And these are our co-hosts, and we greatly, greatly want to thank them. But it's also the partners, Silvana, that have been making this happen.
Yes, let's express a big, big thank you for our partners. Some partners like Salesforce, like MasterCard, have been with us for a long time. Other partners joined recently, Centene or the European Investment Bank or the Gates Foundation. And we're very happy to be able to join really forces. It's our own kind of power together exercise of really bringing all those that work together to achieve that goal of more equality between women and men in leadership, to bring them here to the Reykjavík Global Forum, present their initiatives, join our initiatives, and really make this a landmark for equality between women and men, so that the next generation hopefully doesn't have to fight as much for it as we do.
And a big thanks also, of course, to our conversationists. It isn't a given fact that we can make sure that 900 women leaders from all parts of the world take time and join the conversation. This is what they did now, as they have been doing in recent years. We have been lucky enough to get so many role models that we all know, but also women leaders from ages and different sectors joining the conversation, all in the effort to make things happen and be the force that we need for this to take sort of a turn. Because we're all feeling that also, Silvana, because we are now ending this and we want to be on a positive note, of course, but we also feel the hesitation for some women leaders and from the whole society, if you like, the international society, worrying that we will remember this year not in the way we had hoped for when we pushed for gender equality, but when we pushed back. And we need to make sure that that doesn't happen. We owe that to the girls and women of the world.
Totally. But let's not forget, and definitely not least, last but not least, definitely, to thank our team. Without them, it would have not been possible to pull this off. And it was a true COVID-19 sort of situation team. We had people in Iceland, in Asia, in America, in Africa, because in Europe, of course, continental Europe, and we all worked together across time zones and across many, many other hurdles that we were able to overcome. So thank you, team. Thank you, Hanna.
Thank you,
and thank you, Iceland. And thank you who have watched and followed this forum. And see you next year.
See you next year. Thank you.